Chapter 622. Dake did not have much interaction with Heidi, so this duel was just a normal duel. He rubbed his fingers and the 5 cards in his hand were spread out. Fantasy Beast, Polymorph, Snorlax, Bliss 3, Pride 3, Diru Beast. Should I start with Polymorph and Snorlax? After looking at the cards in his hand, Dake smiled and was ready to summon Snorlax. He remembered the URL Vipkanchu 6. Although Snorlax was not that reliable, it could still increase its defense from 1,000 points to 2,500 points even if it was lying flat on the ground. This was enough to make it an impenetrable iron wall in the first round. Naturally, it would not be needed in the second round. However, there was another way in this duel, which was to summon Fantasy Beast, Polymorph, after summoning Snorlax, and sacrifice the 2 magical spirits to summon Diru Beast. If his opponent was another student, he might have done that. However, since his opponent was Heidi Euphemia, he needed to think more. Once he sacrificed the 2 magical spirits, he would have no more cards in his hand. If the Diru Beast, summoned by the sacrifice, was restricted by Heidi's special method, then the red magic ball would be completely exposed to danger. Therefore, after summoning Snorlax, he would need to observe for a while. Different situations required different tactics. It was not advisable to be stubborn. I wonder what kind of tricks she has up her sleeves? Dake could not help but think. Drip. As if a drop of water had dripped into his heart, the ripples spread out. Preparation stage, battle stage. The first round's 30s countdown had begun. Dake instantly focused and began to cast his usual summoning spell. In the name of Dake Dimeng, I summon Snorlax. After 3 seconds, the summoning light from the magic card lit up the red summoning area. Snorlax, with dark blue long hair and triangular ears, appeared in the light. Then, it scratched its belly. Between the 2 options, attack and defense, it decisively chose defense. Protect the magic conducting ball. Before Snorlax laid down to sleep, Dake issued an order. After that, he began to prepare to summon Fantasy Beast, ever-changing monster. He still had 2 Great Sins 3 in his hands, and either one of them could raise Illusionary Beast, 4/4 monster to 4 stars and transform it into a 1st or 2nd tier magic guide fairy. With these 2 magic guiding fairies, this first round was very easy to pass. Before Dake began his second summon, Heidi finally completed her first summon. Her gaze was sharp as she pulled out the magic card and shouted, "Magic summoning!" In the next moment, a white light shone from the blue team's summoning area. A snow-white spider suddenly raised its head, brandishing its blade-like spider legs. Card name, White Blade Spider. Type, Elf card. Level, ****. Race, Insect. Attribute, Bug Magic Power, 1000 Attack, 1400 Defense, 500 Ultimate Skills, Steel Blade Spider Web, Sticky Silk Spit. Strictly speaking, spiders were not insects, but in this world, they were classified as insect species. As a bug-type magic guide fairy, White Blade Spider gave a rather beautiful visual impression. White Blade Spider, spread the web. After it was summoned, it immediately obeyed Heidi's order, lifting its 2 front legs and hitting the ground hard. At that moment, white spider silk rapidly spread from its body to the front, and in the blink of an eye, it laid out a huge spider web that covered half of the blue team's summoning area. The spider silk of the spider web was as sharp as a steel blade, and some of the spider silk even had extremely thin saw teeth. If someone stepped on it, they would definitely be injured. However, White Blade Spider could glide on the spider web at an extremely fast speed. Therefore, although White Blade Spider's 3 measurements were not high, it was still useful as a part of a positional battle. Heidi closely watched Dake's movements, and after confirming that Dake did not choose to attack, she was slightly relieved. This was actually not a common occurrence in Dake's duels. If Dake chose to attack, she could only order White Blade Spider to use another sure-kill skill, Sticky Silk Spit, to restrict Dake's magic guide fairy. Maybe he didn't get a strong attack-type magic guide fairy. Heidi thought for a moment, and saw Dake summon a second magic guide fairy, it was the more familiar, fantasy beast, Multiform. Most of Dake Diming's magic guide fairies were extremely unique, and it was very difficult to forget after seeing them. Heidi had done in-depth research on him, and was very familiar with his magic guide fairies. This fantasy beast, Multiform, could transform into other magic guide fairies, and was very troublesome. However, its weakness was also very obvious. Its magic value was not high. This meant that in a head-on battle, the side that was cloned would have the advantage. Therefore, there was no need to be too nervous. She took out a second magic guide card and quickly summoned. In the blue team's summoning area, a gigantic bee appeared. Card name, Toxic Queen Bee. Type, Fairy card. Level, *****. Race, Insect. Attribute, Bug. Magic, 1500. Attack, 1300. Defense, 1300. Sure kill skills, Poison Needle, Egg Laying. This Toxic Queen Bee, that was almost a meter tall, had a huge abdomen, and the tips of its two front legs were thin and long, like two poison needles. It was also an insect-type magic guide fairy, but it was completely different from the beautiful appearance of the white blade spider. It was an enlarged version of a real bee, and its thin and long hair could be seen clearly, making one's scalp tingle. After it was summoned, it immediately used one of its sure kill skills, Egg Laying. 3 insect eggs shot out from its abdomen and landed on the blue magic ball. After 15 seconds of incubation, these 3 insect eggs would hatch into 3 1-star toxic bees. With these 3 hypertoxic bees, all the offerings needed for the sacrificial summoning had been gathered. Heidi still did not command the Toxic Queen Bee to attack. She held one of the magic guide cards tightly, as if waiting for an opportunity. After Dake summoned the fantasy beast, ever-changing monster, he did not act rashly either. The first round of the battle round ended unexpectedly in a stalemate. Battle round 2. 30s. Tick. Both players drew their cards at the same time. With 2 new magic guide cards in hand, Dake's heart moved, and he directly picked up one of the magic guide cards and summoned it on the spot. Greed 3, Eagle Wrestling. In the name of Dake Dimeng, I summon Greed 3. It was indeed a very lucky thing to be able to draw Greed 3 in the second round. Dake looked at the sharp spider web that covered the blue half of the field, and he couldn't help but smirk. He controlled the light of Greed 3 and shone it on Little Snorlax. Little Snorlax sat on the ground, and its body grew rapidly under the light of evolution. In the blink of an eye, its weight increased by 4 times. Little Snorlax had evolved from a baby to an adult Snorlax. Snorlax was more than 2 meters tall. It had a huge body and an honest face, and its eyes were always squinting into a line. ZZ, if it wasn't for Dake's order, it would have fallen asleep on the spot. Snorlax, break the spider web. After Snorlax completed its evolution, Dake immediately gave out the order. Crack! Snorlax lazily crawled up from the ground, then it walked toward the blue team's half with swaying steps. Snorlax wasn't interested in the battle at all. Although it was also the incarnation of greed, it didn't have a strong desire to show off like the fruit-eating bug. In fact, it just wanted to end the battle as soon as possible so that it could go back to the magic guide card and sleep. Although it looked like it was walking slowly, it was actually not slow at all. Soon, it arrived at the center of the field. Snorlax just glanced at the white blade spider on the opposite side and slowly lifted its foot. Heidi, who had just completed a new round of summoning, suddenly changed her expression and shouted, Toxic Queen Bee, Poison Needle. After a moment, the Toxic Queen Bee, that was flying in the air, aimed at Snorlax, and suddenly shot out thin and long poison needles. Each of the poison needles was as long as a chopstick, and the tip of the needles was dark as if it was soaked in poison. Then, puff, puff, puff. The 10 poison needles all hit Snorlax's body. However, Snorlax didn't retreat at all. It allowed the poison needles to be bounced off by its fat, and finally, it stomped its foot. Ultimate skill, Heavy stomp. Bang! It sounded like a thunderclap. Snorlax's stomp made the ground tremble. The white light became bigger and bigger, and suddenly, a horrifying circular shockwave burst out. The steel blade spider that the white blade spider had painstakingly arranged was smashed into pieces by the circular shockwave of Heavy Stomp. The circular shockwave had a wide range, and even the white blade spider that was lying on the ground was affected. The white blade spider was an extremely fragile magic elf. After being hit by the shockwave, it melted instantly, leaving not even a shadow behind. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The 3 hatched 1-star, toxic bees, flew into the air in a panic. The blue magic ball was pulled up by Heidi in an emergency and successfully avoided the shockwave. She was still frightened and instantly held the magic card in her hand tightly. Then, she gritted her teeth and began the sacrificial summoning. Although the first round passed safely, Heidi didn't think that she was lucky. When facing Dake that even Sarah was no match for, she was actually a little scared. But she chose to face the difficulties in the end. In the second round, she secretly arranged a secret instrument card, and then began the sacrificial summoning. At the same time, the toxic queen bee that was flying in the air also met the wrestling eagle man. The 2 magic elves began to fight fiercely, and Heidi's sense of urgency was even stronger. Her sacrificial summoning wasn't fast. Once the toxic queen bee's magical power dropped below half, the success rate of the sacrificial summoning would be greatly reduced. Therefore, she had to complete the summoning before then. On the red team's platform, Dake observed the whole situation and then lit up Bliss 3. The magical beast, variety monster, that was guarding in front of the red magic ball expanded slightly in the light of Bliss, and became a 4-star magic elf. Hurry, hurry! Its eyes became sharp, but it didn't find the target of transformation. Only Snorlax was a 2nd-tier magic elf, but Snorlax had no way to deal with aerial units. It narrowed its eyes and aimed at the magic elf that Heidi was about to sacrifice to summon in advance. Heidi's sacrificial summoning was indeed a little slow. When she finally completed it, the 30-second countdown of the second round was almost over. The toxic queen bee relied on the poison of the 2 needles to barely hold on until now. Sacrifice the toxic queen bee and a toxic bee as sacrifices to the sacrificial summoning, cyan-feathered flying snake. In Heidi's magic elf cards, except for the white blade spider, most of them were magic elves that could fly. That was to prevent her own magic elf from being restricted by the steel blade spider web. Clear feather flying snake also flew in the air and could effectively avoid Heavy Stomp and Earthquake. Snorlax finally entered the battlefield, but it could only sit with its head raised. The flying snake with green feathers appeared in the light of the sacrificial summoning array, and the secret instrument card that Heidi had set up in advance was successfully triggered. In the blue team's summoning area, a transparent vortex suddenly appeared. Then, a transparent, clear feather flying snake suddenly drilled out and let out a shrill cry. Card name, Cyan-feathered flying snake. Type, elf card. Level, race, bird beast. Attribute, normal. Magical power, 2100. Attack, 2200. Defense, 1400. Ultimate skill, feather arrow, multiple feather arrow. Cyan-feathered flying snake as 3 attributes were not ranked among the 5-star magic elves at all. But for a student who had just entered the 2nd year, it was already extremely difficult to create such an invisible magic elf card. Not to mention that there were 2 cyan-feathered flying snakes in Heidi's field. Although the cyan-feathered flying snake that was cloned by the secret instrument card did not last long and its 3 attributes were reduced, it was still fierce. Heidi's aura rose. Cyan-feathered flying snake, shoot, feather arrow. The 2 clear feather flying snakes immediately rushed out. The 2 feather arrows were shot in succession. One was shot at the wrestling hawkman in the air, and the other was shot at the Snorlax on the ground. But the wrestling hawkman dodged the feather arrow at an extremely fast speed. The Snorlax let the feather arrow hit it and it still did not hurt or itch. Multiple feather arrow. Heidi suddenly shouted loudly. The tick sound of the turn change was covered by the shouts. Heidi was obviously anxious. The multiple feather arrows, shot by the two cyan-feathered flying snakes, at the same time covered the sky and the sun. The wrestling hawkman could not dodge and disappeared after being hit by several feather arrows in succession. The Snorlax was still unmoved, and in the red team summoning area, the third cyan-feathered flying snake flew up. Good morning. Chapter 623. Battle Stage 3. 30s. Dake calmly drew his cards. The situation on the field was actually very clear. Heidi's deck was slightly different from what he expected. Although it was above average, the gap between her and Sarah was still quite big. The two cyan feather flying snakes seemed to be her limit. He ordered the multiform monster to transform into a cyan feather flying snake, which was enough to protect his magic conducting ball. Then, in the third round of card drawing, the winner would be decided. Curse Cage, Little Devil Beast, War Horn, memorize in 1 second, Vipkanchu. 6. As expected. While Heidi was still focused on the command of the two cyan feather flying snakes, Dake had already summoned Curse Cage, Little Devil Beast. Then, without waiting for anything else, he directly summoned Pride 3. The long-awaited demon beast opened its pitch-black demon wings in the middle of the dark golden light pillar. A ferocious roar resounded through the field, and a thick dark aura spread out. He. The devil beast let out a cold laugh, and its tall body completely disappeared when it turned around. When it appeared again, it had already instantly teleported to the top of the transparent, cyan feather flying snake. Then, a huge sharp deathclaw burst out. Ultimate skill, Deathclaw. The transparent cyan feather flying snake's body was instantly penetrated by the Deathclaw. Its body struggled slightly and actually collapsed on the spot. Cyan feather flying snake. Heidi instantly clenched her teeth. The real cyan feather flying snake suddenly turned around and opened its mouth to bite the devil beast. However, the devil beast did not dodge. It only raised its left arm to block the cyan feather flying snake's bite. Then, it raised its right arm high and suddenly blasted out. With this attack, a large number of Deathclaw appeared in front of the devil beast, and each claw tore off a piece of the cyan feather flying snake's body. The cyan feather flying snake howled and turned into light. Everything developed so quickly that it was shocking. A mere 4-star evil devil beast had actually killed 2 5-star green feather flying snakes in an extremely short amount of time. At this moment, the green feather flying snake that the ever-changing monster transformed into had just raised its feathers and was about to release multiple feather arrows. However, in the face of the life barrier of the blue cube magic ball, the multiple feather arrows still had some effect. On the blue team's platform, Heidi loosened her clenched teeth after both cyan feather flying snakes were described. People were like that. They would only do their best when they saw hope. Hard work without a goal in sight would only wear down a person's willpower. After Heidi confirmed that she could no longer perform, she chose to give up. This duel, which had lasted for a long time, finally ended when the blue cube magic ball was destroyed by the multi-feather arrow of the Monster of Change. For 0000, beep, the referee blew his whistle and announced the winner. The applause was still thunderous, and the atmosphere on the stage remained unchanged. Dake didn't say anything to Heidi after recalling all of his magic guide fairies. They weren't familiar with each other. As the winner, no matter what he said, it was easy to be mistaken as arrogant words. Considering that there might be more opportunities for them to interact in the future, Dake chose not to say a word. After Dake walked down the platform, Heidi slowly recovered and turned to walk down the platform. The two sides passed through the contestant tunnel one after the other and entered the circular belt. Then, they separated into two paths and sat down in different audience seats. Dake felt a little bored. But this was how a magic guide duel was. Once the difference in skill level was too great, the random factors in the rules couldn't change the final result at all. And a duel that was destined to be won would naturally make people lose their excitement. Even if some of the duelists would be immersed in the feeling of being crushed. But Dake was clearly not one of them. When he was in his first year, he had already passed the stage of seeking victory. He had already entered the stage of seeking defeat. What he needed was the excitement after doing all he could, not the merciless crushing of noobs. 2 more rounds. It'll be over after 2 rounds. Dake patted his cheeks and tried to maintain his state. Come on, have some candy. Anna came over and stuffed a milk candy into his mouth without warning. Dake chewed twice, and the milk sweetness reached his heart. Under the blue sky, the young men and women on the duel stage were sweating to their heart's content. Time flowed by them like water. When people came back to their senses, it was already 2 in the afternoon. Doc stepped onto the contestant platform once again. In the 9th round of the Silver Cup competition, his opponent was Ignatz Malcolm, who was also a second-year student of the Magic Academy like Heidi Euphemia. The Magic Guide had always been full of talented people. Although Dake didn't pay much attention to Stephen Kalm, he seemed to be a top student in the Magic Guide, second only to Saraswati. If Sarah was the top student in the Magic Guide, then Stephen Kalm was the top student in the Magic Guide. It was just that Stephen's personality didn't seem to be very sociable, so he didn't build his own fans like Saraswati. He didn't become the leader of the second year in the Magic Guide, mostly because of his personality. Dake raised his head and observed for a while. Stephen had neatly combed short brown hair, thin eyebrows, a high nose, thin lips, and a square face. He didn't look very friendly. But the gold-rimmed glasses on his nose added a bit of a student's aura. Dake thought for a while and confirmed that he hadn't talked to Stephen much, so he prepared to put the deck into the card slot and wait for the duel to start. But Stephen Kalm, who was supposed to be a man of few words, opened his mouth. Dake Dimming, you're very strong. Dake couldn't help but frown and look at him again. Stephen Kalm adjusted his glasses and said seriously, but you should know that if a person is too dazzling, they will expose themselves to too many people. As far as I know, there are already a lot of 3rd and 4th year seniors studying you. Of course, I've also studied you for a long time. Dake smiled and raised his hand. I'm not honored. Stephen Kalm continued, I spoke to you before the duel began because I wanted to give you a warning. If you underestimate me, you'll be in trouble. Dake was slightly startled and asked curiously, why do you think you'll be underestimated? Stephen Kalm was speechless. Beep! The whistle sounded at the right time. The words, preparation stage, appeared on the card table. Both players immediately put the deck into the card slot and activated the automatic shuffle of the card table. Dake didn't ignore Stephen Kalm's words, but what Stephen Kalm said was within his expectations. In a Magic Guide duel, who didn't study their opponent? But being studied wasn't scary. What was scary was being stagnant. In other words, as long as there was new progress every moment, there was no need to be afraid of being studied. Preparation stage, 30s. They abandoned all distracting thoughts and focused on the duel. Both players drew their cards almost at the same time, then looked at their hands and thought of countermeasures. Dake opened his hand. Fusion, Curse Cage, Little Devil Beast, Bliss 3, Month, Diru Beast, Trash Slime, starting with Fusion. Curse Cage, Little Devil Beast, and Diru Beast were both in his hands. Other than not meeting the conditions to sacrifice and summon Diru Beast, the prerequisites for Fusion and Summon were all there. However, these 5 starting points were not ideal. Speaking of which, it's been a long time since I've fused and summoned Basti Beast. Thinking of the feeling of fusing the Little Devil Beast and the Diru Beast into one entity, Dake couldn't help but smile. However, Basti Beast was no longer the strongest trump card in his hands. Using too many Magic Guide cards to summon it was actually a loss. Moreover, he hadn't gathered all the elements this time. Moreover, the 5 Magic Guide cards in his hands didn't have many strategies to think about. He only thought for a moment and picked out Curse Cage, Little Devil Beast. In the first round, if he wanted to ensure the strength of the magic guide fairy on the field, the only way was to evolve Curse Cage, Little Devil Beast, into Curse Cage, Black Diru Beast. He didn't hesitate. The moment the preparation stage switched to the battle stage, he chanted, "In the name of Dake Dim Eng, Magic Guide Summon, Curse Cage, Little Devil Beast." The little devil with bat wings once again appeared in the audience's field of vision. The little devil beast evolved into the form of Devil Beast in the morning's duel. It must still be imprinted in the audience's minds. But the direction of its evolution this time wasn't Devil Beast. Only 2 seconds after Dake completed his summoning, Stephen Kalm also completed his summoning. He looked at the little devil beast on the red side summoning area and couldn't help but smile. Good. Thunder Blast Beast. On the blue side's summoning area, Stephen Malcolm's magic elf, the Thunder Blast Beast, immediately raised its head. The Thunder Blast Beast looked like an upright lizard with an umbrella on its head. However, the tip of the umbrella-shaped object on its head was a long horn that looked like a lightning rod. Card name, Thunder Blast Beast. Type, Sprite card. Level, ****. Race, Reptile. Attribute, Electric. Magic Power, 1500. Attack, 1200. Defense, 1000. Killing Skills, Electronic Interference, Lightning Summon, Thunder Blast Beast, Electronic Interference. Stephen Kalm held the Thunder Blast Beast's magic card and suddenly shouted. The Thunder Blast Beast immediately closed its eyes and gathered its magic power. The needle-shaped long horn on its head instantly twined with crackling electric currents. With Stephen Kalm's command, the electric currents instantly exploded, forming a huge electric barrier that could cover the entire venue. Dake was about to start a new round of summoning when he suddenly felt something strange. He couldn't help but frown. Magic Power Interference Barrier? The electronic interference, released by the Thunder Blast Beast, was obviously not only aimed at electronic products, but also at magic power or some other things. I see. Almost immediately, Doc figured out the crux of the matter. He realized that the results of the research that Stephen Malcolm had mentioned were here. Dake's fighting style was extremely special. In most people's eyes, he was used to using a special strengthening type of magic card to strengthen the magic sprite card and raise its star level. From there, he could special summon a high star magic sprite to gain an advantage. In that case, what about disrupting and blocking his fighting style from the root? Stephen Kalm was probably using this line of thought. The number of magic cards in his hands that could block energy was certainly not a small number. This Thunder Blast Beast should be just one of them. However, even though he had figured out the trick, Dake did not stop summoning. He still summoned and activated Bliss 3 Moon as fast as he could after the 3-second cooldown. Stephen Kalm's tactics had indeed alerted him, but the brilliance of Great Sin was not so easy to block. The electronic interference barrier released by the Thunder Blast Beast was penetrated by the brilliance of Bliss in the blink of an eye. It was as if there was no barrier at all. The little devil beast on the red team's summoning area became a luminous object in the golden-pink brilliance. Stephen Kalm, who was on the blue team's platform, was shocked for a moment. So much so that the summoning of the second magic card in his hand was a beat slower. The little devil beast had successfully evolved into a Heidi Road beast. Although the Heidi Road beast was not considered the top among the 4-star magic sprites, it was not too weak with 2 sure kill skills. Due to the limited cards in his hand, Dake did not advance rashly. Instead, he ordered the Heidi Road beast to take a defensive measure for the time being. At this time, Stephen Kalm finally forced himself to calm down and began to summon the second magic card. However, the application of electronic interference made him have no choice but to change the interference spell that he had originally planned to summon to a magic sprite card that could enhance combat power. Then, the Thunder Blast Beast that he had summoned at the start launched a second wave of attacks during this period. Boom! Dake only felt a thunder sound out of nowhere, and a bolt of lightning really appeared in his field of vision. That bolt of lightning crossed the distance between the arenas and directly shot from below the electronic interference barrier to the Heidi Road beast that had just completed its evolution. This speed even made Dake wonder why it had not used this sure-kill skill at the first moment. If it had not used electronic interference at the first moment but had directly used lightning summon, the little devil beast might have been lying on the ground as a corpse. Dake looked at the Heidi Road beast that had been blasted by this bolt of lightning and became alert again. Although electronic interference did not produce the expected effect, it was indeed a way to obstruct Dake's plan. And a sure-kill skill like lightning summon, which was a long-range high-speed attack, was the nemesis of low-star magic sprites like the little devil beast, Ivan, and other low-star magic sprites. Good morning. Big shots. Please cast your minimum monthly votes and minimum blades. Salty reason. I don't have much free time these few days. I'll start desperately paying back in 2 days. Chapter 624. Stephen Kalm's words before the match were not false. He had indeed done a very detailed study of Dake's tactical system. However, if he wanted to use the results of his research in practice, he would need the corresponding strength. Stephen Kalm had noticed the loopholes in Dake's tactical system and formulated a corresponding strategy. However, not to mention the late lightning, the Thunderblast Beast's electronic interference could not stop the Great Sin card from working. Since electronic interference was useless, then the other magic cards that he had prepared for this, of course, they wouldn't work either. The moment Stephen Kalm's electronic interference failed, he had already noticed this. The anxiety in his heart almost burst out. However, this was a duel on the stage with thousands of spectators watching. He could not leave on the spot, so he could only bite the bullet and continue. The good news was, Lightning Summon had indeed caused damage to the second-tier magic elf, the Hedalu Beast. This meant that this magic elf, which hadn't appeared many times, wasn't as strong as another white cat of the same appearance, Deru Beast. Dark Diamond's hand doesn't seem to be ideal. It's not like he doesn't have a chance. After analyzing this point, Stephen Kalm focused more on the summoning of the second magic elf card. Then, without Dake making a move, he successfully summoned the second magic elf. On the left side of the Thunderblast Beast, a mud-like magic elf slowly stood up. Card name, Mud Monster. Type, Elf card. Level, *****. Race, Elemental. Attribute, Ground. Magic Power, 1200. Attack, 1200. Defense, 400. Ultimate Skills, Disintegrate, Mud Summon, Ground, Elemental, Purple card. The Mud Monster, which was similar to the Stinky Mud, had a certain degree of physical immunity. Like some elemental species, it could split into several smaller elemental species. As for the second sure-kill skill, it was a field skill. It turned part of the field into a muddy swamp, so that the opposing magic elf could not approach from the ground. In the situation where the opponent did not have long-range attacks or flying magic elves, it could ensure the safety of the magic ball. This type of field skill was considered common in magic duels. Some spells were even enough to produce a similar effect. Stephen Kalm glanced at Dake and said in a deep voice, "Mud Monster, summon mud." The Mud Monster suddenly spat out a large amount of mud from under its body. The mud on the ground gradually turned into a muddy swamp. Then, he breathed a sigh of relief and waited nervously for Dake's move. However, Dake still did not move. As expected, after that bolt of lightning, the Thunderblast Beast no longer has any long-range killing skills. Dark held the Deru Beast magic card in his right hand. He was originally considering whether to offer the spell cage, Black Deru Beast, as a sacrifice to summon the Deru Beast on the spot. However, he did not do so after observing the situation. The result proved that his judgment was correct. Even if he summoned the beast, it would be difficult to break through the muddy swamp and approach the opponent's magic ball. Of course, he did not want to dirty the beast. Since Stephen chose to drag it out, I'll go with his wishes, Dake thought. However, the first round did not end there. After Stephen Kalm realized that Dake had no intention of attacking, he still unwillingly released the interference curse. Who cares if it's useful or not, I'll stack it first. Moreover, the interference curse could also interfere with the flow of magic. When it was placed on the electrical interference barrier, it could interfere with the ultimate skills of the aerial units and affect the long-range magic control of the magisters. This was relatively advantageous for him, who had a layer of mud on the ground. Battle Stage 2, 30s. Then, it was the second round. Although both players had different expressions, they immediately took 2 magic cards from the top of the deck. Dake looked down and his heart skipped a beat. He raised his head slightly. Greed 3, Dream Demon, Greed 3? In this way, we even have the sacrifice to summon the Diru beast? There were many tactics that could be implemented. However, Dake did not hesitate the moment he saw Greed 3. In the first 2 rounds, he was able to meet the conditions to summon the Basti beast. This seemingly fateful hand made him feel as if he had heard the call of the Basti beast. In that case, it's decided to be you, Trash Slime. After 3 seconds, Dake successfully cast the normal summoning spell and summoned the Trash Slime. He specifically summoned it above the red magic ball's life barrier and signaled for the black Diru beast to protect it. While waiting for the cooldown of the normal summoning spell to end, he continued to observe the opponent. He found that Stephen Kalm's originally dispirited expression had returned to normal. At the beginning of the second round, he ordered the mud monster in the blue summoning area to cast Disintegrate. Then, the mud monster split into 3 parts. Each of them swelled up into a small mud monster and slid into the swamp, disappearing without a trace. As for Stephen Kalm, he was casting the sacrificial summoning at an extremely fast speed. The second year had an assessment requirement for the use of the sacrificial summoning, but there were not many people who had already started practicing it. Stephen Kalm was obviously one of them. At a glance, it was obvious that he was the type who was very serious in his studies and research. He was also very clear about the goal he wanted to achieve and would keep moving forward to achieve it. In the future, he might grow into a strong opponent. With a thought, Dake immediately began a new summoning. In the name of Dake Dimeng, I summon Greed 3. Even if electronic interference was stacked with interference curse, it could not affect Greed 3's radiance at all. Stephen Kalm's eyebrows twitched slightly. On the other hand, Doc retracted his radiance and shone on the Trash Slime. Trash Slime evolved into Greed Slime 2 for the second time on this dual stage. When this jelly-like slime, which was more than 1.5 meters tall, appeared from the edge of light, the Heidi Road beast immediately retreated behind it. As a 4-star magic elf, Greed Slime 2 had 2,000 points of defense and 3,000 points of magic power. In terms of the 3 attributes, it was a completely exceptional existence. Its killing skill, photosynthesis, also increased its defense by 1,500 points. This made it very reliable. Greed Slime, use, divide and succeed. 4. Dake gave the order, and a huge sacrificial summoning array finally lit up in the blue summoning area. When the light came on, Stephen Kalm's face lit up with joy. Since interference tactic was useless and quick attack tactic was meaningless, then he could only rely on his strength to win. Whether it was luck or not, in short, he was sure that this time, he summoned a magic elf that could determine the outcome of the duel before Dake Dimming. There is 1 3-star Thunderstorm Beast, and 2 1-star Slime Monsters. Sacrifice them to summon Fusion Beast. Card name, Fusion Beast. Type, Elf card. Level, Race, Undying Species. Attribute, Ground, Evil. Magic Power, 2,500. Attack, 2,400. Defense, 1,800. Killing Skill, None. 5-star Magic Elf, Fusion Beast. The Fusion Beast, that appeared from the sacrificial summoning array, had a huge body that was nearly 3 meters tall. Its main body was a huge octopus with 8 tentacles. At the mouth part, there was a sawtooth beak that looked like scissors. On both sides of its body, there was a thick ape arm and a slender praying mantis arm. Starting from the top of its head, along the spine all the way down to one of its tentacles, there were eyeballs of various creatures densely distributed. On both sides of the eyeballs, there were broken demon wings. This fusion beast was like a failed product that walked out of a laboratory. However, while it was a combination of ground and dark elements, it was also an undying species. Its magic power had reached the full 5-star level. Although its attack was not full, it was not weak either. Even its defense was 1,800 points, which could not be considered a shortcoming at all. Its special body structure also allowed it to move quickly in the muddy swamp. In summary, other than being a white card without a killing skill, this fusion beast did not have any obvious shortcomings. If Dake did not respond in time, the fusion beast would indeed give him hope. Next, it's time to blow the horn to attack. Stephen Kalm raised his head and anxiously shouted, "Fusion beast, charge across the field and attack the magic guide ball." It would take a lot of time to deal with the other magic guide spirits. Stephen Kalm knew that he could not afford to wait. He could only fight to end the battle in the second round to have a chance of winning. However, after using the sacrificial summoning spell, he fell into an extremely long cool-down time. Now, he could only choose to believe in his magic guide spirit. However, just as he finished speaking, in the red summoning area, the huge slime's body suddenly lit up. Then, 2 white rays of light shot out from its body. Stephen Kalm was very familiar with this scene. Dark Diamond's magic guide fairy was able to use magic to split offerings. It was much stronger than his mud monster, by quite a bit. And these 2 white rays of light were definitely Dake Diming's sacrificial summoning spell. Too fast. Although it was not the first time he saw it, Stephen Kalm still felt unwilling in his heart. He had clearly been practicing hard, but the final result was far inferior. The only thing that prevented him from feeling despair was that whether it was a normal summoning spell or a sacrificial summoning spell, there was a theoretical limit. Dake Diming had reached its limit first. Although he was a little slower, he could still catch up. This thought quickly flashed through his mind. Then, he saw that in the new sacrificial summoning array, the frightening white cat appeared. Although it was a 4-star creature, it had a 5-star Diru beast. This made his calculation of his chances of winning instantly fall to the bottom. I can't be anxious. In theory, the stats of the fusion beast are higher than that of the Diru beast. He forcefully encouraged himself, trying to find a chance of winning. However, when his gaze fell on the red summoning area again, his eyelids suddenly twitched. He saw the black Diru beast and the Diru beast at the same time. Although Dake had only appeared a few times on the duel stage, Stephen Kalm, who had studied it in detail, immediately made a connection. Then, his heart felt as if it had been blocked. He held his breath and stared, not daring to breathe. Then, he suddenly raised his head and looked at Dake Diming on the red team's platform. Under his gaze, Dake Diming very calmly took out the next magic card and began a new summoning. The fusion summoning also only required a normal summoning spell. However, the summoning time was actually dependent on the rate of magic input. If the Magus had enough magic and the speed of the magic input was very high, he could provide enough magic to the fusion card in 3 seconds. Then, he could activate it within the limit of a normal summoning spell. Dake's magic talent supported him to have the foundation to do this. If an ordinary Archmage's channel was like a small water pipe, then the channel he used was like a ditch. And as time went on, it continued to grow until it reached an unknown limit. At this moment, in the duel arena, Stephen Kalm's fusion beast had just swum through the swamp. It wriggled its 8 tentacles and dragged a long trail of mud as it rushed through the center line of the arena. Greedy Slime, too, turned around and swallowed the red magic ball into its stomach. Black Diru Beast and Diru Beast were behind it, staring at each other. Little Devil Beast and Diru Beast originally didn't get along. After evolving into Black Diru Beast, the feeling of mutual repulsion became even more serious. If it wasn't for Dake's gaze, they would have fought on the spot. However, when the 2 magic elves saw each other, they immediately understood Dake's thoughts. So, even though they hated it, they could only wait quietly. In the name of Dake Diming, I summon fusion. Dake slightly raised the fusion magic card. When the summoning was successful, he flipped the card to the front. The black and white fish that hadn't been seen in a long time quickly swam out of the card and grew with the wind. As usual, the white fish flew to Diru Beast. The black fish flew to Black Diru Beast. The expressions of the two magic elves relaxed, and they extended their claws as if they were welcoming two fishes. The white and black fish circled around them and then turned into two bright lights that soared into the sky. Until then, many of the audience suddenly reacted. Someone was using fusion summoning. Then, cheers suddenly sounded. In the rapidly rising background noise, the two rays of light riding on the fish converged into a Tai Chi pattern in the air, forming a huge and mysterious fusion summoning array. From the center of this summoning array, an even more intense light instantly shot out. 7-star magic elf, Basti Beast, appeared again. Basti Beast lightly pursed its lips, not caring about the situation in the arena at all. It looked up at the red contestant platform above its head. However, the electronic interference plus interference spell barrier made the view above extremely bad. It couldn't help but frown slightly and flicked its finger. From its claw that was studded with rings, a drop of bright red blood instantly shot out. The moment the drop of blood that contained the power of darkness touched the interference barrier, it quickly radiated in all directions like a ripple. In the blink of an eye, the barrier that should have had an interference effect on magic was broken down by magic power. As the blood scattered, the sky returned to normal. The corners of Basti Beast's mouth curled up, revealing a charming smile. Then, its gaze fell on Dake Diming's face. The fusion of two individual consciousnesses was a very wonderful experience. In reality, even if creatures with fusion abilities had telepathy with each other, after fusion, there would inevitably be conflicts in their consciousnesses. But this wouldn't happen in magic elves. This depended on the uniqueness of magic elves. It was also because normal magic elves didn't have consciousness. But Dake's magic elves had consciousness. However, after Diru Beast and Diru Beast fused and evolved, there wouldn't be any conflicts in their consciousnesses. They almost became a single entity, and the thoughts that originated from Diru Beast and Diru Beast overlapped or offset each other, forming completely different personalities and thoughts. Although Dake rarely summoned it in a duel, he also used it for research purposes. However, during research experiments, they would also summon them to assist in research, so they already had a very deep understanding of the Basti Beast. The biggest difference between the Basti Beast and the Heidi Beast and the Diru Beast in terms of personality was that it had become very bold. This caused Dake a lot of trouble. Dake lowered his head and looked at Basti Beast with fiery eyes. He said helplessly, "Let's end the duel first." Meow Heart Suit, Basti Beast, put its claws under the veil, stuck out its tongue, and licked it, revealing an unusually charming smile. As the cat goddess incarnated by Bliss, her frown and smile were full of charm. Tick. The battle stage switched to the third round. But at this moment, neither side drew their cards. Dake was already sure of his victory. Stephen clearly knew that there was no magic card in his deck that could deal with this 7-star magic fairy. No matter what he drew, it would not change the outcome of the duel. He placed his hand on the table and took a deep breath. He tried his best to maintain his usual expression. The result was not unexpected. It was just that he had been using all kinds of possibilities to boost morale and keep telling himself that he had a chance to win. Including the communication before the preparation stage, it was also for this reason. If he did not do this, he was worried that he would not be able to recite the spell well. The pressure that Dake Dimeng brought to his peers was that great. Although the synthetic beast was a 5-star, it could not last one round in front of Basti Beast. Basti Beast did not use Chaos or Vampire's Dance. Instead, it just stretched out its hand and controlled the power of darkness to condense a long whip that was as thick as a bucket. It held the end of the long whip with its 5 fingers and danced like a queen, whipping the synthetic beast fiercely. The ugly synthetic beast was smashed into pieces by the long whip. Then, it shook its hand again, and the long whip condensed by the power of darkness instantly collapsed into countless black bats that flew toward the blue magic ball. These countless bats drowned the magic ball and bit the life enchantment into pieces in the blink of an eye. Basti Beast's innate ability to control the power of darkness always made people suspect that it was not a magic fairy at all. Beep. Battle ended. Winner, Dake Dimming. This duel did not encounter too many obstacles from beginning to end and ended smoothly. However, Dake did get a warning from this duel. He quickly thought about how to deal with it and how to resolve it. Then, he began to recall the magic fairy back into the card. However, he was suddenly stuck when he recalled the trash slime. Then, he suddenly remembered that after fusion, the magic fairy could only be recalled separately after fusion was removed. He had not mastered fusion removal yet, so he could only wait for the effect of fusion to end naturally. Therefore, he only kept the magic card in his hand. After tidying it up, he raised his head slightly and looked across. Stephen saw him looking over and could not help but say, "Aye." Dake smiled and said, "Thank you." Then, he waved at Stephen and walked off the stage amidst applause and cheers. Basti Beast had already walked out of the arena and was waiting below the contestant platform. The man and the pet entered the contestant passage in the blink of an eye. When there was no one around, the Basti Beast's face immediately showed a mischievous expression. Then, it suddenly took 2 steps forward and put one of its hands into the crook of Dark's arm. At the same time, half of its body was attached to Dark's body. Dake immediately smelled a strong musk, and his arm was surrounded by softness. However, he was already used to it and did not care much. Basti Beast rubbed its cheeks as it walked. Its 2 big eyes curved into cute crescents, and the 2 tails behind it kept swinging. Dake deliberately stayed in the contestant passage for a quarter of an hour, and then walked out with a comfortable face. After this duel, he did not have any missions in the afternoon. It just so happened that Anna and Luo C did not have any matches scheduled either. Therefore, the 3 of them agreed to go to Traveler's Street in the afternoon. Seeing Dake's figure appear at the entrance of the contestant passage, Anna's eyes lit up. She immediately pulled Luo C and jogged over together. When she arrived in front of Dake, she stopped abruptly and then jumped lightly. When she landed, she shook up and down and complained cheerfully, "Why did you only come out now?" Dake shrugged and said, "Waiting for the fusion to be removed." "Okay." Anna was just asking casually, but now she immediately changed the topic. "How about it? Have you thought about what you will be playing this time?" Dake said, "I still have the knight. Well, the Night Prince suit in my dorm." Anna blinked and asked curiously, "Haven't you tried it on?" Dake nodded subconsciously and asked, "What's wrong?" Anna immediately gestured to her chest and said, "It's too small." 12 or 13 years old was the period of rapid development. It had been almost a year since they bought the Night Prince and Night Princess suits last year. Whether it was Dake or Anna, they had grown a lot taller. Naturally, the 2 sets of clothes that were custom-made last year could no longer be worn. Luo C on the side also laughed and said, "It seems that Dake didn't notice it at all." Dake touched his nose and admitted, "I didn't expect this either." "Then I win." Anna immediately raised her hand. Dake said helplessly, "Okay, you win." The 3 of them walked out of the open-air arena and walked towards the lake that led to the Traveler's Street. Along the way, the 3 of them talked about the theme of Halloween costumes enthusiastically and laughed non-stop. When they arrived at the pavilion in the middle of the lake, Dake was about to sit down on the stone stool, but Anna grabbed his hand. Anna blinked and said, "Let's think about it for a while before we go in." "Okay." Dake nodded and sat down on the edge of the pavilion. The autumn wind rustled, and the withered leaves drifted into the lake with the wind, causing ripples to appear on the surface of the lake. Students who knew each other and didn't know each other frequently came in and out of the hub of the pavilion in the middle of the lake. Groups of people sat on the stone stools beside the 8 stone tables, one after another. Dake, Anna, and Anna sat on the edge of the pavilion and expressed their opinions. Time passed slowly. Halfway through her speech, Deanna suddenly frowned as if she had recalled some unpleasant memories. Then, she relaxed her brows and her eyes lit up. She said, "Last year, the three of us only acted as normal humans on Halloween. How about we dress up as animals this year? Just like Princess and Chi, we can dress up as a bear." Dake blinked and changed the topic naturally. "Speaking of Chi, I wonder what they will dress up as this year? And Victoria, Phoenix, and Aurora." "Don't change the topic, you just don't want to wear a puppet costume." Deanna puffed up her cheeks. Dake laughed and reasoned, "It's not like you don't know that on Halloween, the last dance is just the end. The real focus is on the activities before the dance. Wearing a puppet costume is not good for moving around. Don't you want to earn credits?" Deanna couldn't help but say, "Yes, I do, but—" Luosi interrupted, "Although credits are important, it's also very important to have a happy Halloween." Deanna nodded quickly and said, "Yes." Dake thought about it and felt that he might be a little too utilitarian. But he really didn't want to wear a puppet costume. What fun could there be in wrapping oneself in a heavy costume that didn't allow air to flow? If he wanted to dress up as an animal, he might as well wear cat ears. Dake pondered for a while and said, "Why don't we compromise and dress up as orcs?" "How can you compromise like that?" Luosi couldn't help but chuckle. Dake said seriously, "Humans and beasts, if we compromise, will be orcs, right? If Deanna wants to dress up as a bear, she can wear bear ears. That's cute, isn't it?" Deanna's cheeks blushed inexplicably and she said shyly, Then forget it. It's not pure." Dake didn't know what to say. Luosi looked at the two of them and suddenly had an idea. She said, "If that's the case, why don't we dress up as characters with Halloween characteristics, such as ghosts, zombies, mummies?" Dake said, "Werewolves, vampires?" Luosi nodded and said, "Witches, fairies, pumpkins, and so on." Dake laughed and said, "Undead birds, Bigfoot, and gargoyles." Then he said, "Thinking about it this way, Victoria and Phoenix only need to dress up as themselves." Deanna asked curiously, "Does a bear monster count?" Dake said, "If you say so, then so be it." Deanna said unhappily, "How can you do that?" Luosi nudged her arm and said, "Why don't we dress up as witches? We just need to customize a costume like Professor Mitya's and we can wear it after Halloween." Deanna said seriously, "Then we'll wear the school uniform. Won't we still be witches?" Luosi was speechless. After a while she said, "Then we'll be fairies? Just put a pair of wings on your back." Deanna shook her head hard. "Fairies are all floating. Like Professor Li, you can't be a fairies with just a pair of wings." "You troublesome fairies!" Luosi shouted and grabbed her. The two of them couldn't help but fight. Dake sat alone on the side and said slowly, "Vampires are actually not bad. They're simple, convenient, and popular. Also, we can customize a set of wings like Victoria's. Werewolves, Bigfoot, gargoyles and the like are not necessary. Ghosts, zombies, and mummies are actually not bad." Deanna stopped and gestured. "A mummy wrapped in bandages?" Dake pointed to his face and hands and said, "Just wrap the exposed parts. Think about it carefully, this is probably the most economical and practical costume." Deanna asked curiously, "What about zombies?" Dake said, "Jumping." Diana hurriedly said, "Then let's stick with mummies. Let me give you an example." Dake shook his head and said, "If you don't like vampires, then ghosts." Deanna gestured again. "The kind of ghosts that cover their heads with a sheet?" Dake shook his head and said, "Of course not. There are thousands of kinds of ghosts. The only thing they have in common is that they are all souls. Their bodies are always in a semi-transparent state. So we only need a bottle of low-quality invisibility potion to achieve the effect of disguising ourselves as ghosts." Deanna asked, "Why low quality?" Dake said, "Because the standard invisibility potion will make you completely invisible. Of course, the effect of the potion has a time limit, so we need to prepare a few more. 25/127. Good morning. 8,000 words equals 4 chapters. Looking for monthly votes and a guaranteed blade. Also, looking for opinions on Christmas costumes. What should we dress up as? Chapter 625. I think so. Luo Si concluded. Witches, fairies, spirits, and vampires. You can choose one of these 4. These 4 costumes are relatively easy to dress up, and they won't affect your movements. Most importantly, they won't be too ugly. Girls really paid more attention to their appearance. Dake smiled and said, I agree. This year's Halloween ball will not be like last year's. Because of the princess's visit, everyone will be dressed in suits and leather shoes. Even if the costumes are a little weird, they won't be too outstanding. Anna patted her cheek and said, But aren't Anna and Enchi in the college? Dake said, when they return after graduation, they may enjoy the same treatment. Anna couldn't help but think, I wonder what kind of costumes they will choose this year? Dake smiled and said, When it's Halloween, you'll see. I hope there won't be any weird surprises. Sigh. Diana patted her cheeks and said, Let me think about it. Dake nodded and said, Let's go to Traveler's Street first. We'll think about it while we walk. Then the 3 of them chose a stone table and sat down on the stone seats around it. When the transmission hub turned, they turned around and entered Traveler's Street. There was still some time before Halloween on October 31st, but Traveler's Street had already been decorated in advance. Many students who had rushed to the party had already put on all kinds of costumes and were running around Traveler's Street. Every time this time, some students would sell the half-finished costume change card that they had prepared in advance at the street stalls. Dake once bought the night dress mask change card from one of the senior stalls, although it was shelved because of the quality problem. But his research on the swap card had indeed started from that swap card. Thinking about it carefully, with his current level, he could completely make the change card by himself, but it was too troublesome and unnecessary. While thinking, he suddenly found Senior Leon, who was hawking on the street. I wonder if Senior Lion's level of making the outfit card has improved compared to last year? However, after pondering for a while, Dake didn't go over to take a look. Compared to a costume change card, he was more willing to go to a clothing store to buy high-quality clothes, preferably the kind that could be worn outside of Halloween. Speaking of which, why don't you disguise yourself as a vampire? Doc's heart suddenly stirred, and he had some intentions. Vampires had all kinds of costumes, but most of them were actually aristocratic costumes, with a pair of wings, a white face, scarlet eyeshadow, and blood-red fangs. In other words, as long as those unnecessary decorations were removed, it would be a set of everyday clothes. Compared to the Night Prince set, that couldn't be worn outside, it was obviously a better choice. A black suit, a black top hat, and a walking stick. That's an old vampire with a great presence. Dake rubbed his chin, wondering if he should get some wrinkles. Then, he saw that Anna and Luo Si were already submerged in all kinds of replacement cards. After a long time, Dake finally pulled them out of the sea of replacement cards. At this time, Anna and Luo Si already had their own ideas. After all, they had been observing the outfit card for so long, and they were always inspired. Luo Si had already decided to play the role of an active little fairy. Anna was very interested in playing the role of a ghost. Then Miss Fairy and Princess Spectre. Dake smiled and said, But prepare the levitation spell and the inferior invisibility potion. Dake actually felt that Anna was more suitable to play the role of a little fairy, and Luo Si was more suitable for the image of Princess Spectre. However, the Halloween costume party wasn't that serious. Of course, they could do whatever they wanted. What about you? Anna looked up and asked. Dake said, Mr. Vampire. There were clothing stores in Traveler's Street that specialized in custom-made wings, fangs, and other small props. The 3 of them walked and shopped, and finally chose a store to enter, ordered the relevant props, and measured the size. They were expected to pick up the goods next Saturday. After that, They turned to other types of clothing stores to buy the clothes they were going to wear when the time came. When they left Travelers Street, they had each chosen a set of clothes. Dark was able to purchase a full set of black clothing, including a hat, as well as a walking stick that he had carefully picked out. The quality of the cane was good. Maybe it could be used to exorcise ghosts during activities. Diana, on the other hand, bought a flawless snow-white princess dress. There was no other color on the dress other than white. Coupled with her silver-white hair, if she suddenly appeared in the middle of the night, she might really scare people. Then Luo-Si, she chose a set of casual clothes similar to Professor Li Li's. When they returned to the tower of the aristocrat house, the three of them separated on the third floor. Diana and Luo-Si entered the same room playfully, then suddenly closed the door and quieted down at the same time. "How is it? Do you have any plans for this year?" Luo-Si asked. Diana said, "The Vampire Prince and the Ghost Princess." Luo-Si shook his head. "Last year, it was useless even if you wore matching outfits, let alone this kind of pairing." Diana couldn't help but pout. "Then what should we do?" Luo-Si said, "If you ask me, this year there are no princesses in the way. As long as we invite them first, it will be easy." Diana couldn't help but think of last year's Halloween, and frowned again. Dake Dimming, who returned to dorm 301, put down the clothes and continued to immerse himself in his studies and research. At this time last year, the students were already worried about their dance partner for Halloween, and this year was no exception. However, compared to last year, the dating atmosphere this year was indeed a bit weaker. After the students reached the second grade, they were obviously more concerned about their academic performance, so they didn't have much time to think about things outside of their studies. And this year, there was no trend of love divination. Instead, it was replaced by simulated duels. Speaking of mock duels, the Duel Club of the People on Travelers Street had already posted a notice about a special Halloween event. It said that a new Halloween-themed card would be released on Halloween, which attracted the interest of many students. Dake didn't participate in the design this time, and he was also curious. This year's Halloween was on Thursday night, and Friday was Halloween. The following Saturday and Sunday were holidays. In addition, the opening ceremony of the Golden Cup would be held on November 1st, Halloween. The simulated duels Halloween-themed card, as well as the new poster and sales information, would be announced during the opening ceremony of the Golden Cup. Dake was looking forward to it. After a quiet night, it was Sunday in the blink of an eye. Dake arrived at the open-air dueling arena at around 10 a.m., and then he went straight to the contestants' tunnel. Diana and Luo-Si didn't have any matches today, so they didn't come to the dueling arena to watch the matches. In fact, they had entered the dungeon early in the morning, and they were ready to go on an adventure. Dark, on the other hand, was about to welcome the final battle of the Silver Cup points competition. Until today, he had participated in a total of 9 matches, and he won all 9 matches. He was ranked first in the Silver Cup competition for Year 2, but this had a lot to do with the number of matches he had. After a month or so, there might be someone who would surpass him with more matches. He didn't care about that. After today's match, the homework assigned by Professor Cheong-si will be completed. Dake thought as he went to the contestants' waiting room. There was still some time before the start of the match, so he observed the other contestants' matches and organized his cards. He only walked out of the waiting room and entered the dueling arena when he received a reminder from the dueling club. When he arrived, his opponent was already waiting for him at the dueling arena. It was the head of the Year 2 Night Academy, a boy with excellent EQ and IQ, Justin Wayne. As the most popular person in the Year 2 Night Academy, Justin Wayne could be said to be the standard sunshine boy, and he was quite popular. He politely shook Dake's hand and nodded. "Although the possibility is not high, I will try my best to win." Dake also politely said, "Anything is possible in the dueling arena. I hope we can have a good duel." "Okay." Justin Wayne couldn't help but smile. Then the two of them let go of their hands and walked back to their respective contestants' platforms. Dake was assigned to the blue side, and Justin Wayne was assigned to the red side. As soon as the two of them stepped onto the contestants' platform, there were immediately shouts from the audience. Without a doubt, it was the Knight Academy and Noble Academy students who were bored. Dake didn't care about those voices. Instead, after putting the deck into the card slot, he observed Justin Wayne on the opposite side of the contestants' platform. Justin Wayne was the sort of man who, in face and in temperament, would have been spontaneously favored. Dake didn't have much interaction with him, but after a year, he had some understanding of him. He had always felt that Justin Wayne might be more suitable for the Academy of the Holy Church's Mystic Rites. In the Academy of the Holy Church's Mystic Rites, he would definitely become an outstanding paladin. Beep! The referee's whistle interrupted Dake's train of thought. He smiled at Justin Wayne, who was also looking at him, and began to concentrate on his preparations. Justin Wayne used a very standard Paladin series of cards. The Paladin series of cards, apart from having more light elemental magic elves, had no special characteristics. In other words, everything was taken care of. Everything was taken care of. If the average level wasn't high, it meant that they couldn't be nurtured well. Of course, if the average level was the best, it would be all-rounder. Justin Wayne was only a second year, so of course, he couldn't bear the title of all-rounder. But compared to some of the other second-year students, his deck was quite comprehensive. Dake didn't underestimate him. Tick. After both contestants finished shuffling their cards, a 30-second countdown appeared behind the words, "Preparation Stage." The duel began. After stepping onto the contestants' platform, the two sides didn't communicate. Their auras were slightly heavy, giving people the feeling that they were going all out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Dake quickly drew his cards and opened them into a fan shape in his left hand. The starting 5 magic cards for the final duel of the Silver Cup Points competition came into view. Diru Beast, Original Dragon Egg, Pride Dragon, Underworld Soul Ring, Fantasy Beast, Ibu. The first magic card he drew was the Cat of Victory, Diru Beast. But he didn't have a sacrifice in his hand that could summon the Diru Beast. Well, that wasn't the case. There's a high chance that Justin Wayne's initial target is a 3-star magic elf. If we use the Underworld Soul Ring to capture it, and use the 1-star illusory beast, Ibu, we'll be able to gather a 4-star offering. But among the cards in my hand, this isn't the best choice. Dake's gaze fell on the Original Dragon Egg. He didn't hesitate and directly picked out this magic card. Justin Wayne's deck wasn't weak, but his style was different from Saraswati's. Dake didn't need to worry about stepping into any traps after summoning the Dragon Egg. Moreover, this was just the starting summon. Tick. The 30 seconds of thinking time ended, and the preparation stage switched to the battle stage. Dake immediately began to use his usual summoning skills. In the name of Dake Dimeng, I summoned the Original Dragon Egg. But when this huge dragon egg that left a deep impression appeared from the summoning light, the cheers from the ring belt came to an abrupt end. The second-year Knight Academy students who were already trying their best to cheer for Justin Wayne couldn't help but hold their breaths. 3 seconds to summon, 3 seconds to hatch. Everyone knew that from this dragon egg, a powerful 6-star dragon species would hatch. How would Justin Wayne defend against the young green-eyed dragon that had rushed to his face at the start of the match? But on the red platform, Justin Wayne didn't shrink back because of this. He was only a few seconds slower than Dake. When the dragon egg shell had just cracked open, Justin Wayne had also completed his summoning. In the name of Justin Wayne, I summoned the Knight of the Shield. White light shone. On the red platform, an armored knight holding a huge shield appeared brazenly. This Knight of the Shield was tall and sturdy, and the huge shield in his hand was over 2 meters long. It was like a city wall blocking the red magic ball. A lot of bad things happened yesterday, and I didn't sleep well. I'm very tired. I'll sleep until the afternoon. I still have to go out and do some work. I'll come back at night to write. Less than half of October is left. I don't have any monthly votes, no blades, and not enough words to update. Despair. I hope nothing bad will happen in the next few days. Finally, I'll release a new book. It's about collecting all kinds of fairy tales in a different world. The author isn't Tochan. Chapter 626. Roar. The young green-eyed dragon that broke out of its shell raised its head and let out a slightly immature roar. The pressure that belonged to the dragon species instantly spread out. Dake looked at the Knight of Shield on the red side and ordered without hesitation, "Attack!" The young green-eyed dragon flapped its wings and charged towards the red side with excitement. Dake himself summoned Illusory Beast, Ibu, the moment it charged out. When Illusory Beast, Ibu, was summoned, the young green-eyed dragon had already crossed half of the field and its big round eyes were surging with boiling battle intent. Knight of Shield. Justin Wayne suddenly shouted. Ultimate skill, Shield of Glory. The burly Knight of Shield suddenly let out a roar and poured all of his strength into the giant shield. Website: https://m Vipkanchu. VIP. The emblem on the giant shield instantly lit up and a bright golden light covered the entire surface of the shield, forming a light shadow that was even bigger than the shield. Justin Wayne, who finally waited until the cooldown of his summoning spell was over, immediately focused on summoning the second magic card in his hand. The next moment, the charging young green-eyed dragon fiercely collided with the Shield of Glory. The golden light of the Shield of Glory trembled crazily and the heavy giant shield was knocked back. The Knight of Shield almost merged with the giant shield. Bang! The golden light exploded. The young green-eyed dragon's charge was actually forcefully blocked by the Knight of Shield. Although the Knight of Shield behind the giant shield was already weak, the burning aura on its body did not decrease but instead increased. Card name: Knight of Shield. Type: Elf card. Level: ****. Race: Human. Attribute: Normal. Magic power: 1100. Attack: 0. Defense: 2000. Ultimate skill: Shield of Glory. Dake was not surprised by this. This was not the first time Justin Wayne's Knight of Shield appeared. Its powerful defense that surpassed stars was amazing. But it could only be used once, not twice. The Shield Knight had used up all of his power just to block the attack. Without the protection of this Shield of Glory, it was impossible for it to block the second attack of the young blue-eyed dragon. But when the young blue-eyed dragon suddenly turned its body and was about to use its dragon tail to viciously lash at the giant shield, Justin Wayne finally managed to complete the summoning at this moment. The second knight appeared in the red square summoning zone. It was a skeleton knight, wearing broken armor and riding on a skeleton horse. Card name: Skeleton Knight. Type: Elf card. Level: ****. Race: Undying. Attribute: Spectre type. Magic power: 900. Attack: 1000. Defense: 900. Ultimate skill: Decaying Justice. Knight's Immortality. The Skeletal Knight, which had 2 sure kill skills, had extremely lousy stats, but as an undying species with 2 sure kill skills, it became Justin Wayne's core magic card. Decaying Justice allowed the Skeletal Knight to completely abandon its defense and gain a powerful attack value of 1900 points at the cost of 0 defense value. Knight's Immortality allowed the Skeletal Knight, or its knight companion, to obtain a chance to avoid death. The specific effect was similar to Kettle Pottis Sturdy, but it could be used on the knight on the right. Therefore, the moment it was summoned, Justin Wayne hurriedly shouted, "Knight's Immortality! Target the Knight's Immortality!" The Skeletal Knight, who understood the Archmage's command, immediately turned its brain and used its hollow eyes to stare at the Knight's Immortality. The next moment, the black light from its eyes drilled into the Knight's Immortality's body. Then, the young blue-eyed dragoness dragon tail viciously whipped the Knight's Immortality's giant shield. The Knight's magic power dropped at a speed visible to the naked eye. When its magic power dropped to 0, the Knight's Immortality's giant shield and body had become completely transparent. However, it did not die, but continued to stand on the battlefield with its specter body. That giant shield that was like a city wall was still blocking in front of the blue square magic ball. Looking at the scene in front of it, the young blue-eyed dragon suddenly stopped and curiously observed the Knight's Immortality. It even raised its claws, obviously wanting to poke it to see. In this urgent duel arena, the young blue-eyed dragon's childish actions caused the situation to suddenly slow down. Justin Wayne made sure that the young blue-eyed dragon was no longer attacking before he let out a sigh of relief. The 30-second countdown of the first round had ended, and if he could draw that crucial magic card, there was still a chance to defeat the young blue-eyed dragon. Dake had never shown the Dragon Egg Transformation's rebirth ability in front of the public, so Justin Wayne did not know about it. Battle Stage 2. 30s. But when Justin Wayne was about to reach for the card, he suddenly realized that Dake Dimming on the blue square contestant stage was flipping another magic card over. Seeing that the surface of the magic card was already suffused with a black light, he suddenly raised his head to look at the projection above. In an instant, he saw the surface of the magic card clearly. It was the magic card that Dark had publicly used in the duel, the Underworld Soul Ring, that had left a deep impression on him. In the name of Dake Dimming, I summon the Underworld Soul Ring. A collar that was burning with grey flames was summoned. Dake turned his wrist and pointed the magic card in his hand forward. The Underworld Soul Ring suddenly disappeared, and when it reappeared, it was already on the neck of the Skeleton Knight. The knight's magic power had already reached 0, but the Skeleton Knight was still full. There was no need to say much about the choice. Dake did not give Justin Wayne a chance to continue dragging the battle back. The moment the Underworld Soul Ring was on the neck of the Skeleton Knight, a vigorous grey flame suddenly ignited. After that, Dake raised his hand and forcefully pulled the Skeleton Knight into the air, and quickly dragged it towards the blue square. At the same time, he gave a new order to the young blue-eyed dragon: "Wake up." The young blue-eyed dragon instantly clenched its fingers into a fist, and with a stern expression, it punched the transparent shield of the Knight of Shield. That Knight of Shield, which had a complete defense and did not have any trace of magic power remaining, was suddenly smashed into pieces by this sudden punch. After that, the young blue-eyed dragon charged towards the red square magic ball without hesitation. On the red square contestant stage, Justin Wayne's expression changed greatly, and he instantly raised his hand to point at the magic ball. Magic power threads shot out crazily, sticking to the magic ball. Justin Wayne pulled hard, and that red magic ball was pulled upwards. However, the young blue-eyed dragon instantly spread its wings, and with a stomp of its feet, it shot into the air with a boom. The punch from below almost instantly shattered the magic ball's life enchantment. At the same time, the red magic ball, which only had 1,000 magic power points remaining, was also sent flying upwards by this punch. The young blue-eyed dragon flapped its wings and suddenly chased after it. Justin Wayne's expression became even more urgent. At this stage of the duel, unless the Archmage had the ability to multitask, or the life enchantment of the magic ball could withstand one attack, there was basically no way to reverse the situation. Dake looked at the situation on the stage, and decisively stopped the sacrificial summoning. At this moment, it was meaningless to use the Skeleton Knight as a sacrifice to summon the Diru beast. The young blue-eyed dragon was enough to end this duel. The previous duels between the strong seniors were all like this. If one was not careful, they would lose the entire game at the beginning. No matter how many trump cards were hidden in the deck, the opponent would not give you the chance to use them. Dake Dimming's duel method was not something that the new second-year duelists could deal with. Justin Wayne tried his best to control the magic ball to dodge, but the young blue-eyed dragon easily caught up, and then smashed the last of the life enchantment with a slap. As the magic power of the red magic ball returned to 0, the duel came to an end. Beep. The battle is over. Winner, Dake Dimming. The referee announced the end of the duel. He also announced the end of Dake Dimming's Silver Cup points competition. He would temporarily leave the Silver Cups arena and focus more on the higher-level competitions. After Dake recalled the Magic Elves one by one, he nodded slightly at Justin Wayne and walked down the stage. Justin Wayne was not depressed for too long, and he also walked down the stage after Dake left. For the second-year students, there was still a long time, and there was still a lot of time left in the second year. The temporary failure was not important. What was important was whether he could learn something useful from this failure. Next, Justin Wayne would also sign up for the Golden Cup, which was not limited to any grade, like all the other second-year students who had obtained the dual qualification. Although most of the second-year students were destined to be rabbits squeezed into a pack of wolves, this was the purpose of Professor Pawa Cheong-si. After Dake left the stage, he left the open-air duel arena. The Silver Cup was temporarily over. The makeup for Halloween was also more or less ready. Next, in addition to continuing to study the method of refining the clown mask into an item card, he also needed to spend more time on the astrology and alchemy classes. The difficulty of these two elective classes was rapidly increasing with the advancement of the course. Especially the astrology class. Dake had found that he was gradually unable to keep up with the teaching progress of the astrology class. First, it was because Professor Mitya Bartholomew's teaching content was becoming more and more specialized, and second, it was because his divination talent could not keep up. But Dake did not feel that he had a divination talent from the beginning, so he was not too depressed. What made him more worried was that little Ivan was also unable to keep up. What troubled Ivan was, of course, not the divination talent, but the fact that his knowledge was not enough. This meant that even if he evolved into Son Ivan, he would not be able to master it. The only thing Dake could do now was to copy the notes as thoroughly as possible for future research. Even if he did not pass the astrology class this year, he could still study according to the notes. As Ivan's knowledge increased, there would be a day when he would be able to master astrology. As for Dake himself, he had his own specialization. He was very open-minded in this regard. On the other hand, Dake performed well in the alchemy class. Although Professor Ka Zayer's teaching content was becoming more and more in-depth, his talent in alchemy was clearly far stronger than in astrology. So far, he had not encountered a situation where he could not understand the teaching content. But as the class progressed, Professor Ka Zayer also began to assign homework. This included homework related to alchemy experiments, which took a lot of time. In this situation, Dake had already grasped some basic alchemy, and he was getting closer and closer to his goal of making golems. A week passed quietly in the midst of the increasingly heavy schoolwork. On the last weekend, a few days before Halloween, the second-year students seemed to have suddenly gotten rid of the delay, and the festive atmosphere finally erupted. In fact, Dake Dimeng had already received several invitations to the ball, and this weekend, he received even more invitations. He had clearly rejected some of the girls last year, but this year, he received their invitations again. While Dake politely rejected them, he sometimes wondered why these girls, who had not interacted with him for a year, thought that an invitation could change the result. Fortunately, Halloween was not Christmas, and the romantic atmosphere of the second year was indeed a lot weaker, so he did not receive too much harassment. October 26th, Saturday. Dake once again met up with Deanna and Luo C to pick up the makeup items that he ordered last week from Travelers Street. Then, the three of them strolled around Travelers Street for a while, and only returned to their dorms after lunch. After returning to the dormitory, Doc excitedly equipped himself with the vampiric fangs, pointed ears, and wings. He then looked at the vampiric wings in the mirror and suddenly had the idea of making them into item cards. The reason was naturally because the vampire wings on his back were big and stupid, and they could not be moved. Whether it was in terms of aesthetics or flexibility, there were huge flaws. So, he decided to do it. Dake's research on item cards had reached a certain level of attainment. Moreover, the vampire wings were not difficult to buy. It was just that the vampire wings that were mass-produced lacked special features. So, even if the creation failed, it was not a big problem. There are two elements. One is to make the vampire wings move. The second is to allow the vampire's wings to shrink and shrink. The former is very simple, but the latter is somewhat difficult. But if we do not pursue the strength of the vampire wings, and do not need to add the ability to fly, Dake analyzed for a while, and then directly began to experiment. After 2 hours, he was a little excited and held a magic card in his hand. If one were to insist on a description of this magic card, it should be classified as a type of outfit card. A transparent human figure was drawn on the surface of the magic card, as well as the vampire's wings, fangs, and sharp ears that were mounted on the transparent human figure. Yes, he had incorporated the fangs and ears into the card as well. Not only that, but the transparent human figure only had makeup on his face, making his face pale and his eye sockets deep, as if there were thick dark circles under his eyes. The name of the magic card was Vampire's Ritual. After using the usual summoning spell to summon it, one could obtain a disguise similar to that of a vampire. He pressed the magic card on his chest to experiment, and as expected, it was successfully summoned. And with the injection of magic, it was very simple to control the vibration of the wings, and it was lifelike. In addition, it could also shrink the vampire wings to the size of a palm, like a pair of chicken wings when it was not in use. He thought for a while, and then put on the black suit he bought before, and then put on the top hat, picked up the cane, and summoned the vampire's ritual again, and perfectly disguised as the noble Mr. Vampire. Needles don't poke. Compared to the Night Prince set, last year, Dake obviously liked this set of makeup more. At least it made him look like he was really attending a Christmas masquerade ball, and not some noble dinner party. I wonder how Anna and Luo are preparing? Dake touched his chin, a little curious. But he did not go and ask. Just like how he did not ask about Panduola's Halloween costume at all. Those would all become the surprises of Halloween. Furthermore, this year's Halloween seemed to have even more surprises. From this week onwards, there was a sudden rumor that this year's Halloween event would be completely different from the past. Obviously, the Academy had been using the same set of rules for so many years, and at most, they would adjust the credit rewards of various ghosts. But when he thought about how Professor Ka Zaire was addicted to Heart of God, Dake felt that the rumor was much more credible. Without Professor Ka Zaire presiding over the event, the professors in the Academy could really do anything. Among them, Professor Lili needed to be the most vigilant. But because of this, Dake was looking forward to it even more. Although the rules of the Halloween event were classic, he had already participated in it once, and naturally, he hoped that there would be a new experience in the new year. Dong dong dong. Dake raised his head and looked at the door, then pouted at the little monster. He removed the vampire's ritual costume and quickly cleaned up the remnants of the experiment. Not many people would come to look for him at this time. There were even fewer people who were limited to the noble courtyard. Anna and Luo were the most likely, but they still had lunch together at noon today, and the probability of them coming in the afternoon was not high. And apart from them, Aurora came the most frequently. However, Aurora always appeared at night, and he could hardly see her during the day. If it's not them, who could it be? Eudora? Dake turned his head and looked at the door. The little monster had already opened the door, and today's uninvited guests finally poked their heads in. It was Anna and Enchi. Good morning. You ****. Looking for monthly votes. Chapter 627. Since school started in September this year, Anna and Enchi rarely came to find trouble with Dake. Especially after the math class incident, they took the initiative to avoid him. Of course, they didn't settle down. Dake could always get all kinds of information from Aurora. Although they had always been very obedient in math class, they were more and more unscrupulous outside of that. The first grade was still in a mess. It was rare for the two of them to take the initiative to come today. Wait a minute. Dake let the little monsters take care of them while he continued to tidy up. 10 minutes later, he put away the last of the bottles, washed his hands, and walked to the desk. Anna and Enchi were sipping apple juice and looking at the various furnishings in the room curiously. Did you encounter any trouble? Dake asked directly. Remember the URL? Vipkanshu. Vienna and Enchi rolled their eyes at him almost at the same time and said, Can't we come if there's no trouble? Dake pulled out a chair and sat down, asking, Have you been here before? I've been here before. Anna immediately raised her hand and glanced at the third princess, Enchi. Enchi immediately exposed her. Don't think I don't know what you're here for. Anna stuck out her tongue and said, Ha ha ha. Dake shook his head and smiled. Okay, what's the matter? The two little princesses stopped playing. Anna rolled her eyes and said, Here's the thing. Enchi took a fancy to a outfit card in Traveler's Street, but she doesn't have enough credits.
Didn't you take a fancy to it? And she immediately blurted out.
Anna said in surprise, "No way, sister. I'm kind enough to accompany you to borrow credits, but you're pushing the blame to me?" "You're the sister." And she retorted, "It's you who wants that outfit card." "Anna, it's you." And she, "It's you." Seeing that the two little princesses were about to quarrel again, Dake couldn't help but cover his forehead and say, "Wait, the outfit card isn't expensive, right? I remember that there are only 3 levels, 33 credits, 66 credits, and 88 credits. Although there are surprisingly many people selling it this year." As he spoke, he suddenly stopped. He saw that the two little princesses were embarrassed. They were obviously showing a guilty conscience. His heart skipped a beat, and he asked hesitantly, "You can't even take out a 2-digit number of credits?" The little princesses, who were still trying to be brave, immediately looked away and did not say a word. "Gee. The little devil beast suddenly let out an ear-piercing laugh. The rest of the other elves who were in the dormitory were also curious. Even the credits in their branch cards were more than double digits. What's wrong with these two humans? How poor they were. Anna and Enchi, who suddenly revealed their poverty, were no longer as arrogant as before. After a long silence, Anna curled her lips and said, "You can only get 10 credits for a normal class. Even if you answer the questions correctly, you can only get 5 credits. Although the consumer goods on Traveler's Street aren't expensive, if you want to do experiments, you have to buy your own materials and experimental tools. The Academy doesn't allow holy coins. How can it be enough?" Yes. And she immediately agreed. The two sisters had never been so congenial before. Dake rolled his eyes and said, "This isn't the reason why you can't even afford a outfit card. Tell me, what do you want to buy?" Anna and Enchi suddenly stopped talking. The two quickly looked at each other and felt that Dake was becoming more and more annoying as he grew up. Anna was a little angry. "Just tell me if you want to borrow it or not." Dake looked at her angry face and suddenly wanted to laugh. However, he successfully restrained himself and asked, "How much do you want to borrow? When do you want to pay it back? How much is the interest?" Anna widened her eyes and said with a look of disbelief, "Interest? You're actually asking us for interest? Dake, you've changed." Dake said with a serious face, "This is the Academy's rule. Every transaction between students must be of equal value. If I lend you credits, you have to pay me interest or something of equivalent value." And she immediately interrupted, "I've read the Academy's rules. The Academy's rules don't prohibit giving gifts." Dake said indifferently, "You need a reason to give a gift." And she immediately said, "A Halloween gift." Dake shook his head. "Halloween isn't here yet." And she suddenly said angrily, "What's wrong with it being a little earlier? Dake, when did you become so rigid?" However, after saying that, she suddenly seemed to realize something and calmed down. Then, she suddenly changed her expression and said with a smile, "Then pay me interest. As long as you lend me enough credits, I'll give you a chance to have the first dance with me at the last ball of Halloween. You have to think about it carefully. A chance to dance with me is hard to buy." "Hey, Enchi." However, when Enchi finished speaking, Anna looked at her in surprise as if she was looking at an indescribable creature. "Why are you looking at me?" Enchi turned her head and stared at her. "Can't you see that I'm selling my beauty? Why don't you do it?" "Fine, I'll do it." Anna immediately stuck out her chest. Dake's mouth twitched and he said, "Forget it. If you can pay me back in a week, there will be no interest. However, I can't lend you too much." Today was October 26th. There were 7 days in a week, which meant that it would be the afternoon of November 2nd next month. Even if Anna and Enchi didn't say anything, he could guess that the reason why they wanted to borrow credits was most likely related to the activities on Halloween. However, as long as there were serious activities, it was easy to harvest thousands of credits during the activities. Therefore, as long as they didn't lend too many credits, there was no situation where they couldn't pay it back. After he said that,
Anna and Chi immediately stopped arguing. Almost at the same time, they patted their chests and said, "Don't worry, we'll pay you back in a week. If we can't pay you back, I'll give Anna and Chi to you as a pillow." Dake thought for a moment and said, "That's not necessary. If you can't pay me back in a week, you'll have to pay 3% interest. After 2 weeks, I'll use my authority as a teacher to force you to pay. So, don't think that you can deny it." Anna and Chi didn't want to deny it. They nodded without hesitation and said, "Okay. That's good." Dake said, "How much are you going to borrow?" Both of them raised a finger at the same time. Dake estimated, 1,000. Anna boldly said, 10,000. Dake shook his head, 1,000. Essay. Anna puffed up her cheeks. 1,000 it is. Plus the credits I've accumulated before, it should be enough. Wait, and Chi suddenly interrupted, 1,000 each. Dake thought for a moment and said, "Okay." 1,000 each would be 2,000 credits. 2,000 credits was a huge amount for first-year students who had just entered the school for 2 months. The reason why Dark chose to lend it out was because he wanted to see what the two of them could come up with. After all, what kind of Halloween would it be if no one messed with it? Then, the three of them took out their school cards and used them to draw up 2 loan contracts. After signing the contract, Dake transferred 1,000 credits to each of them. The moment the credits were in their hands, the 2 princesses couldn't help but grin. Then, they drank the apple juice in one gulp and said excitedly, "Then we'll go first." With the credits, they naturally had to spend it. They had to hurry before the sky turned dark. Dake shook his head and watched them leave. However, Chi, who was walking behind, had just closed the door when it suddenly opened. A head popped out from the crack of the door and asked with curved eyes, "Are you really not going to consider the interest I mentioned?" Dake smiled. "It's going to be dark if we don't leave now." "Hee hee." And Chi giggled, retracted his head, and closed the door. Then, the footsteps behind the door gradually faded away. After Anna and Chi left, Dake couldn't help but think of Victoria and Phoenix, who were also first-year students. Ever since they entered October, he rarely paid attention to Victoria and Phoenix. Apart from not wanting them to feel restricted by their parents, the more reason was that he was too busy. Even before and after the first-year mathematics class, he didn't have much time. As a result, he basically got all the information about the 2 magic elves from Aurora. It just so happens that the research on the item card is almost over. Let's find time to have a meal tomorrow. Dake couldn't help but estimate. Therefore, that night, when Aurora delivered supper as usual, Dake was prepared to ask her to pass a message. Although the first-year dormitory was downstairs, the boys' and girls' dormitories had always been separated from each other. He also needed to avoid suspicion. Aurora followed Dake's suggestion and tried to make wheat cakes tonight. The filling made of shrimp skin, chopped green onions, diced meat, dried tofu, eggs, and other things was wrapped in the wheat cakes. The fragrance spread everywhere with a bite. Every magic elf present ate one, and oil flowed out of their mouths. Dake couldn't help but sigh as he recalled the familiar taste of the wheat cakes. Aurora was always able to make a perfect dish on her first try. Her talent in cooking was amazing. After distributing the wheat cakes, Aurora said, "I actually made a lot more, but I'm keeping it warm in the dormitory for the time being. I'll bring it over tomorrow morning. When the time comes, I can bring it to the club classroom to share with the other magic elves." "How thoughtful," Dake sighed. Aurora continued, "Oh right, I already sent a portion to Victoria and Phoenix before I came. They said it was very delicious." Dake nodded and said, "Call them over tomorrow. Let's have a meal together." "It's not a problem to inform them," Aurora said curiously. "Why did you suddenly think of asking them to have a meal together?" Dake smiled and said, "I suddenly feel that I don't care enough about them. It's a pity that Aunt Claire has already left school. Otherwise, I would have called her over." "Aunt Claire has already left?" Aurora was a little surprised. Dake nodded and said, "She left last Sunday night. Irene also left together with her." Aurora suddenly said, "No wonder I only saw one person when I passed by the duel shop." Dake nodded and said, "Yes, only Sister Eve is left for now. However, we're already hiring clerks. We expect to hire 1 or 2 juniors as part-time employees. If you know anyone who is lacking credits, you can also recommend them."
Aurora immediately said, "Can I?"
Dake was startled, then smiled and said, "If you're lacking credits, you can look for me directly. I've eaten your supper for 2 months for free. According to the school rules, I can pay you a sum of credits." Aurora bit her lips slightly, obviously conflicted. Dake waved the wheat cake in his hand and said, "Don't be embarrassed. This is an equivalent exchange."
Aurora hesitated for a moment and said softly, "Then,
"I need 200.
No, 150 credits."
Dake couldn't help but want to laugh. "Do you have the branch card? I'll round it up for you." Thus, when Aurora thought that she had rounded it up to 200 credits, Dake gave her 1,000 credits. Without waiting for her to refuse, Dake said, "Almost every supper costs 10 credits. 1,000 credits for 100 times. The extra 50 times can be considered as an advance payment." Aurora grabbed the branch card and whispered, "It doesn't matter if it's 50 times or 500 times. It's fine.
Good luck." Dake saw her shyness and encouraged her.
"Although there may be changes in this Halloween event, the Crimson Star Award will definitely not be cancelled. I hope you can strive to become this year's Crimson Star."
Aurora nodded vigorously and said, "I will do my best."
Dake immediately revealed a satisfied smile. This year's batch of first years was not inferior to their batch. Although these 1,000 credits couldn't change anything, it could make up for some of the time Aurora wasted to study the recipes. He also wanted to know who would be able to get on the stage of the award ceremony. As for the second year's Golden Orange Star, he was determined to get it. After Dake finished the wheat cake, he talked about tomorrow's dinner party. "Yes, Eve needs to look after the shop. Otherwise, it's good to call her. Do you have a favorite restaurant in Travelers Street?" Aurora shook her head and said, "I've been to a restaurant in Travelers Street." "Who will be at tomorrow's dinner party?" "Let me do the math." Dake said, "You, me, Victoria, and Phoenix. If we're going to Travelers Street, it'll be 4. "Really?" Aurora's face flushed, but then she said, "Aren't you going to call Deanna?
Also, Joey and John."
Dake smiled and said, "No, just the few of us will be enough. I mainly want to personally ask about Victoria and Phoenix's studies and friendships." Aurora nodded and said, "In that case, we can actually cook by ourselves. I have a complete set of equipment in my dorm." "Cook by yourself?" Dake frowned slightly. When he was in first year, he occasionally cooked by himself. But since school started again during the holidays, he had not touched kitchen utensils. Moreover, in front of Aurora, his cooking skills were not good enough. But sometimes, the taste of the food was not the key. He thought for a while and nodded. "That's a good idea. Do you have equipment in your dorm to remove oil and smoke?" "Of course," Aurora said. "Not only that, I also refined an oil and smoke beast. As long as I summon it when I'm cooking, I guarantee that no oil and smoke will leak out." Dake's eyes lit up and said, "Is it the oil and smoke beast? Then maybe we can eat in the club classroom. After all, it's not suitable in the dorm." Aurora was slightly regretful. "That's true. But kitchen utensils are not easy to move." "No problem." Dake said, "Let's eat hot pot tonight. As long as we prepare the soup base and ingredients in advance, we don't need too many kitchen utensils. But if it's in the club classroom, we might need to prepare a few more sets of cutlery." Aurora smiled and said, "Deanna and Luosi?" Dake laughed. "We still can't get rid of them." Aurora said, "Then prepare the soup base and ingredients in my dorm. 4 hot pot. Some ingredients need to be cooked in advance. I'll try my best to prepare it." Dake said, "It's okay. I'll prepare it with you. Tomorrow morning, you go and buy what you need. I'll prepare all the ingredients and come to your place around 3 in the afternoon." Aurora immediately replied, "Yes, yes, yes."
There was no dish called hot pot in this world, but similar cooking methods were not rare. When adventurers were camping in the wild, they would choose a similar method if they wanted to eat something hot. However, Dake had told Aurora long ago, and the latter had even tried to do it. The soul of hot pot was the soup base and sauce. To Aurora, this was not a problem at all. After sending Aurora off, Dake planned the number of ingredients he needed to buy tomorrow. Since he was eating hot pot in the club classroom, he would definitely bring all the magic elves, so he would need to prepare a lot of ingredients. In addition, Katrina and Brittany might also be there. Thinking of these two seniors, Dake couldn't help but think of another senior. He pondered for a moment and felt that he could also try to invite them. After all, he had just received help from them 2 weeks ago. He couldn't remain silent all the time. It was just that this way, the scale of the meal seemed to be getting bigger and bigger. What's going on? Didn't I only plan to have a small family dinner? Dake couldn't help but ask himself. Of course, no one answered. The next morning, Dake finished his breakfast and read the newspaper. Then, he watered the catgrass and worm tree with a magic potion, and went out with a book. Sheng Molian Library. Pan Duola Doragon came to the library very early. It was said that the best time of the day was in the morning. She also felt that reading in the morning would make her mind clearer. Moreover, not many people came to the library early on Sunday morning, so she could have some peace. However, after reading about 10 pages, she saw Dake appear at the entrance of the library. When Dake approached the counter, Pan Duola moved the registration form over and said, "Good morning, looking for information?" "Good morning, Senior." Dake didn't pick up the pen. Instead, he went straight to the point. "Can I invite you to dinner tonight?" Pan Duola narrowed her eyes and said, "It's for 2 people?" Dake said, "No, it's barely a family meal." "Really?" Pan Duola complained in her heart, but still asked, "And those people?" 26/127. Chapter 628. Seeing Pan Duola ask this, Dake knew that she had tacitly agreed. So, Dake said with a smile, "Victoria, Phoenix, Aurora, and a few people from other clubs. After all, we're having dinner in the club's classrooms." "In the club's classrooms?" Pan Duola thought for a moment. "You're cooking by yourself?" Dake nodded. "Yes." Pan Duola suddenly understood. "Barbecue?" Dake, "Barbecue is fine, but today's main dish is hot pot." "Hot pot, the one you mentioned before?" Pan Duola was a little interested. "When?" Dake said, "In the evening, after 6 o'clock." Pan Duola nodded. "Okay, I'll let Miss Bella know. Don't start before I arrive." "Of course not." Dake patted the little winged dragon that flew over and smiled. Memorize in 1 second https://m. VIP can't you? VIP. After the agreement was made, Dake didn't stay in the library for too long. He first went to the cafeteria and got some recipes from the halfling chefs. Then, he called the 2 magic elves and prepared to go to Traveler's Street to buy ingredients. But just as he walked to the entrance of the castle, he sensed something. Then, Victoria, who was wearing the fool's uniform, suddenly jumped out from the corner. He hurriedly reached out and hugged her. Victoria looked up at him with tears in her eyes. "What's wrong?" Dake asked subconsciously. Victoria sobbed. "You're biased." "Boo-hoo." Dake. "Ha." Victoria wiped her tears and peeked. "Why do they have pocket money but I don't?" "Boo-hoo." Dake. "Who are you talking about?" Victoria let go of him and took a step back. Then, she counted with her fingers and said, "Anna, Anchi, Aurora. They all have pocket money." Dake. "So, how did you know?" Seeing the suspicion in Dake's eyes, Victoria hurriedly said coquettishly, "I don't care, I strongly insist on treating everyone equally." "Okay then." Dake tapped her little nose and said, 1,000 credits, 7 days. Otherwise, you'll have to pay 3 points of interest. If you can't pay it in 2 weeks, I'll take it by force. You should know what that means. It's just negative credits, I know.
Victoria was overjoyed and almost jumped on the spot. With 1,000 credits, I'll definitely earn more credits before Halloween. Doc asked helplessly, "What about Phoenix?" "She's over there," Victoria said excitedly. Doc looked at the corner and said, "Let her come over." He couldn't be biased. There were 4 more days before Halloween. If they could make use of these 4 days, both Victoria City and Phoenix City would be able to create a few useful magic elf cards. After drawing up a contract with them, Dake transferred 1,000 credits to them. Then, he watched his darlings, who didn't think of their old father at all except to borrow money, hurriedly ran to the pavilion in the middle of the lake that led to Travelers Street. Presumably, they were already thinking about what to buy before they came over. But as long as it wasn't for enjoyment or waste, Dake wouldn't care. But, did Victoria forget that she's a 6-star vampire's daughter? Dake pondered for a while and muttered to himself, "Well, considering the expenditure and replenishment of magic power, she's indeed not suitable to participate in battle." Then, he slowed down and entered the pavilion in the middle of the lake behind them. After arriving at Travelers Street through the teleportation hub of the pavilion in the middle of the lake, Dake looked at the street full of pumpkins and knew that there would be street activities tonight. This year, October 31st was a Thursday. According to tradition, October 31st and November 1st were holidays. Because it happened to be the weekend, there was a 4-day-long holiday. And Travelers Street would open again on the morning of October 31st. Today was the only day left for the students to buy the items they needed for Halloween in Travelers Street. This day, as expected, would be very busy. Sure enough, Travelers Street was crowded with people, jostling shoulder to shoulder, and yelling incessantly. Fortunately, there weren't many people who would come to Travelers Street to buy ingredients. After Dake found a shop, he quickly bought what he needed. But he didn't leave. Instead, he turned a corner and came to the shop of the Ultimate Duel Club. Eve happened to be free. When she saw the young master, she hurriedly went forward to greet him. Dake looked at the shop full of Halloween decorations and curiously asked, "Business isn't good today?" Eve smiled and said, "Today, there aren't many people who came to buy duel plates, Easter eggs, and card packs. The customers are probably busy choosing the costumes to wear for the Halloween ball." Dake thought for a while and asked, "What about you? You're a student of the academy, so you're qualified to participate, right?" "Yes." Eve nodded. "Professor Shi Erfu told me that I can participate in this masquerade ball as a first-year student. But I don't have a magic elf. If I participate, I'll have to rely on my own strength to compete. That's not in line with the Academy's principles. So, I'll probably just walk around casually. It's fine if you think it's okay. Do as you wish." Dake walked into the shop and asked, "Are the Halloween-themed cards ready?" Eve said, "It's ready. In fact, we've already started marketing outside the Academy. The corresponding Easter eggs, card packs, and Halloween-themed duel plates will be officially released on Halloween." "I see." Dake thought for a while and asked, "What about in the Academy?" Eve smiled and said, "Because of the timing, the Academy will release them on Halloween. Then, they'll do some original works at the opening ceremony of the Golden Cup. According to Young Master's previous idea, we'll also sell Halloween Easter eggs with models and cards at the opening ceremony of the Golden Cup. There's a chance that there'll be Halloween-themed limited edition cards inside." "That's right." Dake couldn't help but smile. Rarity was value, and limited edition was charm. It seemed that the teachings he had been teaching by word and example were working well. However, since the shop wasn't as busy as he had imagined, it wouldn't be a big problem to invite Eve for a meal. So he said to Eve, "Get ready. Come to my club's classroom at about 6 o'clock in the evening and eat whatever you want." Eve paused. When she realized that this was an invitation to a meal, she hesitated and said, "But I'm the only one in the shop." Dake waved his hand and said, "It'll be fine if it's closed for a while." Eve bit her lips and lowered her head to think. She wanted to go, but her rationality told her that she couldn't go. She was very conflicted. Dake looked at her face and said, "This is an order." "Then, okay." Eve said, "Then I'll eat faster." Dake smiled and said, Up to you. Okay. Eve couldn't help but smile brightly.
After chatting with Eve for about 10 minutes, Dake left the shop and walked all the way out of Travelers Street. Then, he climbed up the spiral clock tower with a large amount of ingredients and brought them to the club's classroom. There was no one else in the classroom except for the magic elf. Dake didn't actually inform the club members, including Dee Anna and Luo C. According to his idea, this was just a family meal. If someone happened to meet him in the club, he would bring them along. If not, there would be 2 less mouths to feed. In short, it would depend on who was more lucky. I heard that some clubs will also hold activities like a dinner party on Halloween. But they usually hold it on the night of Halloween, which is different from the masquerade ball on the eve of Halloween. Dake looked around and suddenly found that the classroom lacked a festive atmosphere. He called the magic elf for a small meeting. Meow Meow immediately volunteered to make a pumpkin lantern. The rest of the magic elf were also very interested in decorating the club. Dake gave this task to them and started to prepare the ingredients himself. He had a kitchen knife, chopping board, plates and bowls. Currently, he was mainly washing the ingredients and slicing and dicing them. As for the ingredients that needed to be cooked, he had to wait until Aurora finished her work and went to her dorm to make them together. Because there were a lot of ingredients, he had a lot of work and spent a lot of time. But he was finally done before noon. Then, he stopped and decorated the club's classroom with the magic elf. The atmosphere in the classroom was very lively. There was a monster running around with a slimes on its head. There was Auntie Bird playing hide and seek with a sub-beast. Xiong Bao blended in naturally. There was also Moon Soul, who was pretending to be cold and aloof. With everyone's hard work, the Magical Zoology Club's classroom gradually had a Halloween atmosphere. Dake rarely had time to relax. The hidden tiredness that had accumulated over the past few days gradually dissipated in the busy atmosphere. He felt relaxed from the bottom of his heart. At 3 in the afternoon, Aurora, who came to look for Dake, was surprised to see the club's classroom completely changed. Dake put down the work in his hands and called out, "Are you done?" Yes.
Aurora nodded. "I've bought everything that needs to be bought. Let's prepare tonight.
We'll start the experiment tomorrow," Dake said. Then, let's postpone our supper until after Halloween? If we delay the acquisition of the Crimson Star because of this, I'll feel guilty.
Aurora blushed slightly and said, "It's nothing." Then it settled. Dake waved his hand. "Come, put the ingredients that need to be cooked in the baskets. Let's take them together?"
Okay.
Aurora quickly walked over and carried the 2 heavy baskets, one in each hand.
Dake could only take the last, smaller basket and walked out of the club's classroom with her. Not long after, the 2 of them arrived at the 2nd floor of the aristocrat house's tower. Aurora temporarily put down the baskets, opened the door, and invited Dake in. It was Dake's first time entering her dormitory, so he was not reserved. Aurora's room was very tidy. The shelves on the desk were filled with books that were out of the scope. There were a few cute little dolls on the bedside cabinet. In the place where Dake's lab table was placed, there was a stove, a cupboard, and a dazzling array of kitchen utensils. Under normal circumstances, cooking in the dormitory would inevitably cause oil and smoke pollution. However, relying on the high efficiency of the magic tools to smoke, she minimized the oil and smoke pollution. If it was not for the fact that his dormitory did not have space to store these things, Dake would have really wanted to get a set. He praised a few words before starting to cook with Aurora. The 2 of them worked together very smoothly. In just a short while, Dake fell from his initial leading position to a supporting position. Aurora's culinary skills were very high, especially the way she cut the vegetables was like the god of cookery. Her wrist and fingers were very stable. This would definitely allow her to achieve twice the results with half the effort in her magic engineering experiments. Dake was very experienced in this aspect. He could not help but observe her jade-like delicate fingers. Aurora's ears quietly turned red. In less than 2 hours, they finished almost all the work. Dake thought for a moment and said, "Since there's still time, let's make a few more side dishes and bring them over?" Aurora nodded her head slightly and did as he said. Dake summoned the little fiend and asked it to call a few magic elves to go to the cafeteria to buy some bread and milk. Then, after Aurora made a few dishes, he helped to stack them into the baskets one by one. There were 3 baskets when they came and 4 baskets when they left. The 2 of them covered the baskets with white cloth and carried 2 baskets each as they walked out of the tower of the House of Nobles. Naturally, they attracted a lot of attention along the way. But they were already used to attracting attention. When they returned to the club classroom, Dake heard the girls' playful voices before he even entered the door. Even if he could not tell from the voices, he could guess who was so energetic. He opened the door and saw Victoria and Deanna playing around. Deanna was here, so naturally, Luo C was here as well. Katrina and Senior Brittany were not in the living room. Dake looked around and guessed that they were most likely distressed over the choice of makeup clothes, so they did not come to the club classroom. Of course, this was a good thing. He immediately called out, "Prepare tables and chairs and set up the venue." The magic elves meowed and got to work. Tables, chairs, pots. These things were all moved to the empty space between the 6 classrooms. The magic elves were very excited. To them, any kind of gathering was new, and the activity itself was full of fun. Dake and Aurora began to boil water, add soup, and make the base of the pot and the sauce. Aurora summoned the Smoke and Smoke Beast at the beginning. The cloud-like magic elven flew into the sky and spread out into a layer of clouds in the blink of an eye. The smoke and steam coming out of the pot were all absorbed by the layer of clouds. Dake was relieved after trying it out. Then, he buried his head and got busy again. 6:00 in the evening. Panduola Doragon happened to walk up to the 10th floor of the spiral clock tower. She only glanced at the club classroom door and then turned to the small path between the 2 classrooms. The Smoke and Smoke Beast absorbed the smoke and smoke, but it could not stop the fragrance from overflowing. Panduola's appetite was gradually aroused. At this time, the sky was dark, and there were no magic lamps installed in the open space. The magic elves made a few homemade jack-o'-lanterns and hung a few paper bats and ghosts from the ceiling. Panduola walked into the passage, and the lively scene hit her in the face. She held back a smile and quickly walked in. Since Katrina and Brittany weren't present, everyone present was someone she was very familiar with. "Is this a family gathering?" Panduola recalled the word family, and her smile became even brighter. Dake did not stand up to receive the senior. He just waited for her to come in and asked her to sit down. Then, he introduced the way to eat hot pot with great interest. After the introduction, he separated the small bowls and told them how to mix the sauces. Cub Bear climbed onto the chair, and its big round eyes shone. In its memory, it had never experienced such a novel way of eating. Panduola looked at it curiously and asked casually, "Why are there monsters here?" Cub Bear's expression froze, and the fork in its hand almost slipped. Its monster intuition made it feel threatened by Panduola, but there were too many people here that made it feel threatened, so it ignored it. It did not expect Panduola to point at it. It quickly looked at Dake for help. Dake smiled and said, "It's a monster from the underground city. It's now being raised like a magical animal." Panduola frowned and said, "Monsters from the underground city can come out?" Dake pointed at its head and said, "Usually not. But it's not their bodies that restrict them, but their brains. Their brains are restricted by the underground city, and they can't walk out of the underground city with their own will. In other words, as long as the monsters have their own thoughts, this is not a problem." Panduola immediately asked, "You made it?" Dake smiled and said, "No." Panduola frowned and asked, "Secret?" Dake nodded and said, "Yes." "Then forget about it." Panduola picked up a pair of chopsticks from the table and looked at it curiously. "Is this the alternative tableware you mentioned before?" Dake said, "With chopsticks, it's easier to pick out the food you want to eat from the hot pot." As he said that, he demonstrated and picked out a piece of cooked meat from the pot, dipped it in the sauce, and put it in his mouth to chew. Panduola immediately followed suit and picked out a piece of meat from the boiling pot. When everyone had started eating, Eve finally arrived. She followed the voice and walked into the open space. She saw a person and a magic elf sitting around a table, eating heartily. There was a large pot in the middle of the table. The water was boiling, and steam kept coming out of it. She could not help but think of the time when she was training in the wild. She also made a pot like this and then put all the ingredients she collected into it to cook. The taste was terrible. Will it really taste good like this? Eve could not help but wonder. Dake immediately noticed her and said, "Sister Eve, you're finally here. Sit down." "Young master." Eve took a light breath and walked to Dake's side and whispered in his ear, "The Duke said he wants to see you." "Good morning, writing all night long. Looking for monthly votes. Meow meow meow." Chapter 629. Yes, yes, I know. Dake casually responded to Eve's words as he picked up a small bowl and began to put in the sauce. "By the way, do you like sesame sauce?" he asked. Eve paused for a moment and said, "It's okay." Dake scooped some sesame sauce into the small bowl and mixed it evenly. "Sit down, put in whatever you want to eat." Eve reminded him in a low voice, "But Duke, eat a little first." Dake showed a warm smile. Since her younger sister, Erin, had returned to the capital, she could contact Yvette any time, anywhere. Dake's original idea was to ask Eve to have a video call during the Halloween ball, which would be more meaningful. But since Irene took the initiative to invite him, he certainly couldn't refuse. But Eve had worked hard in the shop for the whole day, so she should fill her stomach first. Website: https://m. Vipcanchu. VIP. After passing the small bowl to Eve, he picked up a piece of meat and put it into the colander in the pot. After it was cooked, he quickly scooped it up and put it into Eve's small bowl. Eve looked a little embarrassed, but she still picked up the fork and tasted it. When the meat entered her mouth, it was tender and smooth, and with the taste of the sauce, she couldn't help but swallow her tongue. Eve subconsciously sped up her eating speed. Dake saw that she liked it, so he continued to put the meat into the pot. This time, he put in more meat and gave it to Anna, Panduola, and the others. Kameng. Little Snorlax suddenly made a sound of dissatisfaction. Dark laughed and specially prepared a large spoonful of meat slices for it. He knew from the beginning that there would be a few big eaters in tonight's dinner party, so of course, he prepared enough to fill them up. Eve looked at her young master's happy face and finally didn't urge him anymore. However, although she saw her young master's happy appearance, she didn't notice the sadness in his heart. From the beginning of the meal, Dake had been going through the cycle of cooking, sharing, but he only tasted a little. Although he had the urge to overeat, he had to restrain himself. Just like every midnight snack, he was actually controlling the amount he ate. That was truly an unspeakable bitterness. Half an hour later, Doc was finally half full. He looked at Eve, who had stopped eating, and asked, "Is the barrier problem solved?" Eve nodded and said, "I've already obtained permission from Professor Shi Erfu." Then, she retrieved a cylindrical item the size of a knuckle and said, "With this key, I can use the consonant spell to communicate with her in the academy." "I see." Dake nodded. "Let's ask her if it's convenient for us to contact her." Eve said, "Okay." Then, under the gaze of the people around her, she raised her hand and pressed it against her temple, her eyes narrowing slightly. Along with the circulation of mana, the bloodline of the twins resonated, and consonance was activated. Eve's and Yirine's thoughts synchronized instantly. At this moment, even without speaking, they were able to communicate at high speed. After a while, Eve opened her eyes and nodded at Dake. Dake took a bite of the vegetables and said, "Let's begin then." Upon receiving the instruction, Eve turned around, faced the snow-white wall, and cast the consonants again. A familiar living room scene suddenly appeared on the wall. Arvette, who couldn't wait any longer, and Claire, who was beside her, were also reflected in it. Behind the two of them were Head Maid Jasmine and Head Maid Ollie. "Good evening, Mother, Aunt Claire." Dake picked up his chopsticks and winked at the projection. "Good evening, darling." Eve, can you take a look?" Arvette said anxiously. Eve let out a hollow laugh and turned around while maintaining the projection position.
She opened her eyes and looked at Dake. What she saw would be projected onto the walls of the Duke's mansion through the consonance spell. When Arvette finally saw the treasure that she had been yearning for day and night, her anxious mind instantly calmed down. But she still stared at the projection on the wall and said, all right. Don't move. Let me take a look." Then, Eve stared at Dake's face without moving an inch. Even though Dake knew that it was to cast the consonance spell, he still felt creeped out by her stare. He said helplessly, "Mom, have you had dinner?" Arvette finally stopped staring at him. Eve, who was synchronized with Yirine's thoughts, also relaxed a little. Arvette said, "Not yet." "I heard that you're having a banquet tonight?" "It's not a banquet. It's just a gathering of everyone for fun," Dake said. "Is the food in the mansion not ready yet?"
Claire, who was beside Arvette, said with a smile, "Aren't we waiting for you?"
"Huh." Dake turned to the hot pot on the table and suggested, "Why don't we chat while eating?" Arvette agreed immediately. Then, Yirine got up and walked to the dining room. When they all arrived at the dining room, the projection stabilized. The people on both sides, separated by thousands of miles, ate together. After Arvette had seen enough of her precious son, she signaled for Eve's camera to turn around and greet everyone present. Deanna, Aurora, and Panduola were already used to the Duke's lack of arrogance. Only Luo Si felt flattered. Cub, who was standing on the chair, seemed to know for the first time that Dake was the Duke's son and the Valkyrie's son. He had read many books during this period, so of course he knew what the Valkyrie represented. He couldn't help but shrink his neck and try to make his presence as low as possible. But his existence was so special that it was impossible to hide. Arvette glanced at him and suddenly said, "Is this surely Augustine?" Obviously, Claire had already revealed what happened in the dungeon to her. Cub realized that his identity as a monster had long been known and couldn't help but become more timid. But fortunately, Arvette didn't seem to have any intention of delving into it. While Cub secretly heaved a sigh of relief, Arvette focused more of her attention on Panduola. After greeting Panduola, she said softly, "I heard that Hephaestus has successfully been promoted?" Panduola said gratefully, "Yes, it's all thanks to Aunt Claire's help." Arvette suddenly said, "She teaches the first years?" Panduola said, "Yes. The first years study magical beasts." Arvette nodded. "Then Victoria and Phoenix will need her to take care of them." Panduola revealed a warm smile. "Although I want to say yes, they don't need extra care. I heard from my mother that both of them are very good at studying magical beasts." As soon as she said that, Victoria raised her chin slightly, and Phoenix's eyes lit up. But then, Dake's voice sounded faintly. "But their other grades aren't ideal, especially their history of magic." Victoria's and Phoenix's faces froze in an instant. Victoria quibbled softly, "Actually, my math grades are okay," Dake smiled. "Indeed, after all, you ran 49 meters ahead of time." Ugh. Victoria was speechless. Dake had already been concerned about them before cooking. Victoria and Phoenix's grades were basically the same. Their history of magic was their common shortcoming. On the other hand, summoning, dueling, and magical beasts were their strengths. The summoning spell was a result of their prior training in the control of mana. Furthermore, as magic elves, they had certain natural advantages in this aspect. As for the duel lesson, it was because they had learned the summoning spells better than the average person, and they had also been taught by Dark. As for magical beasts, it was very simple because they were not afraid of danger and dared to come into close contact with the teaching monsters that Hephaestus had brought. Naturally, they learn faster. However, the remaining theory of magic and potionology were not so lucky. Their grades in these two classes could only be considered passing. But compared to history of magic, it was definitely more than one level stronger. In Victoria's words, history of magic was really too boring. Moreover, the history in the history of magic was about the history of humans. It had nothing to do with magic elves. Then, she was lectured by Dake. History of magic had the history of the evolution of magical technology, which was the birth of magic elves.
It was impossible that it had nothing to do with them. Victoria was speechless and could only pretend to be dead. Yvette was obviously very concerned about the grades of these two magic elves. Phoenix had accompanied her for many years. Apart from their grades, she was also very concerned about their lives in the academy. It had been almost 2 months since school started. Even the first-year little mages should have recognized the identities of these two magic elves. Yvette was very worried about whether they would be discriminated against. Even if no one dared to bully them openly because of Dake's existence, the silent abuse between classmates was very terrifying. As an archmage, Yalvette hoped that her magic fairy could have a happy life in the academy. Fortunately, what she was worried about did not happen. The students of the Shangmalian Academy were almost used to the reality that magic elves were no different from humans. And once Phoenix's true identity was completely exposed, it would only make her more popular. After all, she was Yvette St. Diming's immortal spear. Yvette's interruption did not cause the meal to stop. Under Dake's greeting, the atmosphere here warmed up and gradually relaxed. In the dining hall of the Duke's mansion, many head maids heard the commotion and came over, one after another. The two sides were thousands of miles apart, but they were having dinner together. After that, Yvette was also concerned about Dake's results. Of course, there was no need for her to worry. Dake's calm and confident answer made her smile uncontrollably. Yvette said at the end, "I heard from Claire that this year's Halloween event will be very different. Perhaps you will have a more enjoyable night." As expected. Dake drank a mouthful of soup and could not help but ask, "Aunt Claire, can you reveal it?" Claire laughed, "Of course not. You will be surprised when the time comes." "Dake, I hope it's not a panic attack." Claire's eyes flashed quickly, and she said, "Yvette and I will be watching the opening ceremony of the Golden Cup on Halloween afternoon. I hope to see you on the duel stage." Dake said uncertainly, "Although I signed up, the opening ceremony is so important. They should let the star contestants of the senior year, for example, Senior Panduola, go on stage, right?" However, Panduola looked up and smiled. "Then I'll sign up?" Dake was surprised. "You didn't sign up?" Panduola nodded. "Originally, I didn't." Dake thought for a moment, then said, "Then I'll sign up." Panduola smiled sweetly. "Why? Do you want to fight me?" Dake touched his nose and said honestly, "Indeed." Panduola said, "Then I'll sign up." Dake was worried. "It won't affect your study schedule, right?" Panduola shook her head. "Of course not. The duel won't take more than a few minutes. I'll just treat it as an exercise. In fact, I was going to sign up, but I haven't yet." Dake nodded. "If you really meet me, Senior, please don't go easy on me." Panduola smiled. "Even a lion uses its full strength to catch a rabbit. I'll never go easy." Dake could not help but say, "I'm looking forward to it." This dinner lasted until 9 o'clock in the evening. Eve originally wanted to rush to Traveller Street after eating a few bites, but she did not expect to be grabbed by the back of the neck by the Duke. She could only act as a camera for more than 2 hours. Only when all the ingredients were cleared and there was nothing left to cook did the other side reluctantly stop the consonant spell. If it were not for Claire's suggestion, the Duke would have talked until dawn. After Dake and Yvette said goodbye, he looked at the table and sighed, "Let's clean up together. Who knows, we might be able to make it in time for the last performance at Traveller Street." However, plans could not keep up with changes. When they finished cleaning up and rushed to Traveller Street, they found that the performance there had already ended. The students had either scattered or left. The originally bustling street became desolate in the blink of an eye. The group was not too disappointed. They chatted and laughed as they walked on the empty street, treating it as a meal to aid digestion. They strolled under the moonlight, laughing non-stop. At 11 o'clock, they returned to the castle and went their separate ways. After Dake and Panduola waved goodbye, only Deanna, Luosi, Aurora, and the magic elves were left. "Let's go back. We still have classes tomorrow." They smiled at each other, quickened their pace, and entered the tower of the aristocrat house.
3 days passed in the blink of an eye.
When they looked up again, it was already the night of the 30th of October.
There are still 10 days left in October. Work harder to reach 100,000 words. Brothers, cast your monthly votes. Chapter 630. Aristocrat House Tower, Room 301. Tomorrow is the Halloween event? Dake sat in front of his desk, infusing all the magic cards with magical power and stacking them neatly. In order to prepare for the Halloween event, Kieran had specially concocted more energy potions and revealing powder. The effect of the energy potions was needless to say, and the revealing powder was a necessary magic card against ghost-type monsters. Although he already had the spirit bug that could break through illusions, the spirit bug was very fragile and could be instantly killed by an AoE attack at any time. Therefore, there was no harm in preparing more revealing powder. Other than that, Dake did not make any additional preparations. He was very confident in his current deck and even felt that he could challenge the boss he encountered last year, the Vampire Earl. I wonder what the rules of this year's masquerade party are? The professors had done a surprisingly good job of keeping it a secret this time. Until now, they had not revealed the specific rules. Remember the website, Vipcanshu. 6 Of course, perhaps some of the students who were close to the professors had already received some information, but they did not leak it. In short, Dake did not deliberately ask. Instead, he was secretly looking forward to the possible surprise. At the same time, within the 4 towers, almost all the students were excitedly making their final preparations. The unknown made people fearful, but it also made people curious. Even the upperclassmen, who had experienced Halloween events for several years, were reinvigorated because of this. The students were rubbing their hands together, waiting for the ball to arrive. In any case, the professor's strategy of keeping it a secret seemed to be very effective. It had successfully hooked the students' interest in love to activities. Everyone was looking forward to and longing for an unprecedentedly grand Halloween masquerade party. The calendar flipped. October 31st. According to the past, the masquerade party would start at 6 p.m. sharp. Before that, the students could participate in the activities in the castle until 12 p.m. sharp. After that, they would have to return to the tower dormitory and leave the castle to the professors and the school staff. All the monsters and traps in the masquerade party were set up in a short 6 hours. However, today was obviously different. When the students woke up in the morning, they immediately received a notification from their school card. No one was allowed to leave the tower. Although this ban was only enforced by the guardian statues at the entrance of the tower, and there were various ways to get out if one really wanted to, it was obvious that no one would risk being locked up for such a meaningless thing. So that's why you didn't get your breakfast? Dake looked at the branch card in his hand and said helplessly. The little devil beast sat on the table and spread out its wings like a pair of hands, then shrugged. As a loyal and dutiful familiar, it flew to the cafeteria to get food as usual, but the halfling chef only handed it 2 newspapers. The little demonic beast said, "Although it's a pity, the cafeteria can't provide food today." "Then there's no other way." Dake clapped his hands and said, "Although we have a lot of spare food in our dorm, there are always students who don't have the habit of storing food or who just happen to finish it. The academy wouldn't let the students starve for no reason. It seems that this year's Halloween masquerade party has started now." "It's starting now?" The little devil beast jumped up and said excitedly. "It seems so." "We were really caught off guard by the professors," Dake said. Because they usually had to return to the tower at noon, he didn't recall the magic elves living in the club classroom. Even Paradise was still in the club classroom. However, he didn't intend to take back Paradise. It was still not too late to recall the magic elves now, but it would take some time to replenish their magic. Let's get ready first. Above the spiral clock tower. As the magic elves were unsummoned and turned into light, the remaining ones in the club classroom immediately became aware. As a familiar, the sub-ancient beast was still in the club classroom. It picked up the little devil bird and walked out of the classroom with Xiong Bao.
When it came to the guardrail overlooking the castle, its eyes suddenly widened.
What's that? Outside the huge castle, black runes converged into a dragon and whizzed past in front of him. Then, a pumpkin carriage descended from the sky, and the purple witch walked out of the carriage. She stepped on the black fog and walked in the air, elegantly waving the magic wand in her hand. As the magic gathered, the tip of the magic wand shone with a black light. A string of runes swarmed out of the black light and gathered into a new rune dragon. These rune dragons circled around the castle, and some drilled in through the windows. Gradually, a barrier appeared and blocked the sky, causing the light in the castle to become dim. The sub-ancient beast stared at the witch with its eyes wide open. The little devil bird in its arms flapped its wings and tried to escape, but it was tightly hugged by the sub-ancient beast. The little bear blinked its eyes, and under its nonchalant appearance, there was a deep fear hidden. Midya Bartholomew, the astrology professor who always held classes in the classroom above them, turned out to be such a terrifying conjurer? Conjurers were also a type of magic profession, but like alchemists, they had become relics of the times. Conjurers often gave people the impression that they were darker and more terrifying than mages. In all kinds of stories and biographies, they always played the role of evil villains. However, they were actually just mages who were good at using runes to set up barriers and rituals. As for the main reason why they gave people a bad impression, the curse ability, it was just a part of ritualistic magic. The reason why conjurers went to the end was because of the appearance of the mystic ritual card. Midya Bartholomew was not only an astrologer, but also an experienced conjurer. Of course, she was also a mage who was good at using the mystic ritual card. In fact, there was no conflict. For example, Professor Ka Zayer was a master alchemist and an expert in magical engineering theory. Whoa! Little Bear Cub suddenly saw Professor Midya turn around and wink at it. It subconsciously shrunk its neck and ran back to the club classroom. The masquerade party on Halloween was a very dangerous event for it. Normally, if the students suddenly saw a bear cub in the castle, they might think about the reason for its appearance here. However, during the masquerade party, they would definitely attack without hesitation. Therefore, Dake reminded it early on that it absolutely couldn't leave the clock tower tonight. It would only be safe if it stayed on the clock tower. However, when the clock struck midnight, it could still go to the banquet hall on the first floor of the castle with the sub-beast to enjoy the charm of the party. It had been looking forward to it. Inside the tower of the noble house. After Dake took back all the magic elves, he gave a simple explanation of the current situation. Then he got up and changed his clothes, preparing to disguise himself as a vampire before going out to explore. His choice wasn't wrong. After he changed into a black suit and put on a tall gentleman's hat, he activated the vampire ritual. Pale makeup appeared on his face, his mouth was filled with sharp fangs, and a pair of bat wings suddenly opened behind him. Standing in front of the full-length mirror, Dake was sure that he had perfectly disguised himself as a vampire noble. Although he was a bit different from the expected old noble, his facial features were a bit too young. However, the coldness and arrogance of a vampire were vividly displayed. Unlike last year's masquerade party, this year, he had the self-awareness to play the role. "It's time to go out." He grinned, revealing his sharp fangs. He picked up his cane and pushed the door open. There were already many people walking around in the corridor. There were many people who felt that the event had started early. Most of the second-year students who walked out of the dormitory had already changed into their costumes, and the students who didn't quickly went back to the dormitory to change after seeing the other students' costumes. Dake closed the door and put his hands on his cane. The little monster flew to his shoulder. "Good morning, Dake." "Good morning, Mr. Vampire." The second-year boy who walked out of room 302 quickly changed the way he addressed Dake. Dake nodded slightly and said in a cold voice, "Good morning, Mr. Masked Knight. How is it?" "My Masked Knight suit is great, right?" Mr. Masked Knight said proudly. Dake looked at the red fly compound eye mask on his face and tried his best to hold back the corners of his mouth. "Did you buy this from a senior?" Mr. Masked Knight said, "Yes, a senior from the House of Fools." Dake couldn't help but think of Senior Lee Ong. Mr. Masked Knight said, "Right, what do you think is going on?" "I'm talking about the notice on the branch card." Dake thought for a moment and said, "Maybe it's a warm-up event to give the professors time to set up the venue, and the event reward is all kinds of food?"
Mr. Masked Knight patted his head and said, "Now that you mention it, it does seem to be the case."
"Hey, I'll be going first. My companions are calling me." Dake nodded and said, "Okay. Although it's not Halloween today, I still wish you a happy Halloween."
"Thank you."
Mr. Masked Knight waved his hand and trotted towards his companions, the yellow and blue masked knights. Dake pursed his lips and smiled, and walked forward with his cane. Of course, he was going to find Princess Ghost and Miss Fairy. But, at this moment, Princess Ghost had just been woken up by Miss Fairy and was in a hurry to wash up and put on makeup. After waiting for a while in the corridor, Mr. Vampire still didn't see them go out, so he followed the crowd and came to the common room. As expected, the common room was full of people. Driven by the mentality of conformity, all the students in the common room had already changed into their costumes, even though the professors didn't announce the start of the event in advance. This year's masquerade ball was obviously more open than last year's. Without the visit of Princess Elisha, there was also no group of people who deliberately wore a banquet dress to curry favor. Most of the students had put on their personalized makeup clothes. In contrast, the costumes of the 3 red, yellow, and blue masked knights were nothing. Dake even saw a Tauren in the crowd.
"Hey,
Dake, over here." The Tauren raised a decorative giant axe and waved it at Dake. Dake recognized the identity of the student under the Tauren's skin from the voice and walked over. Then he saw a pig-headed man beside the Minotaur. "Oh my God, Doran and Pittan, how did you become a Tauren and a pig?" Dake wasn't so exaggerated.
He walked in front of the Tauren Doran and the pig-headed person Pittan and asked with a straight face, "Any information?"
Doran spread out his hands and shook his head frantically. Dake frowned and looked around.
He found that most of the students were discussing in low voices, but no one could come up with any substantial results.
"Is it not time yet?" He raised his head and looked at the clock on the wall. 7:13. Maybe it won't start until 7:30? As time passed, more and more people gathered in the common room. The public lounge, which was usually very spacious, gradually became crowded.
Doc found the translucent Princess Ghost and Miss Fairy, who was floating in the air by some unknown means, in the crowd. But the 2 princesses, who should have been very conspicuous, had changed into some unknown costumes. They were completely submerged in the crowd and couldn't be found. Joey, who was also in the House of Nobles, wore a princess dress and a crystal crown, looking like a princess. Time passed quickly. When the hands of the clock pointed to 7:30, from the direction of the spiral clock tower, there was a loud and clear sound of a bell.
Duong!
The sound of the bell echoed in the castle for a long time.
The students in the 4 towers all quieted down at the same time.
"It's here."
Everyone thought so and then took out their school card from their card pack and activated it with magic. Dake also activated his school card and opened the new information. "Answer the question and obtain your identity."
"Obtain my identity?" Dake couldn't help but frown. This information prompt was concise and to the point, and it was also in line with the theme of the masquerade ball. But what was the meaning of its existence? He couldn't help but turn his head slightly, wanting to see if Doran's school card had the same prompt. The huge bull's head just happened to turn around and block his line of sight. Dake. Of course, Doran's school card also had the same prompt. And under this prompt, there was a 60-second countdown. When the 60-second countdown was over, the line of words gradually disappeared and the first question appeared. But at the same time as the question, there was another prompt. Remember to keep it confidential. Thus, in the next instant, everyone covered their school cards. The people who had gathered in the common lounge dispersed with a loud bang.
"Good morning, early to vote for the monthly vote. Happy every day."
Chapter 631. After a while, there were only a few people left in the common room. The remaining few people looked at each other and suddenly retreated to the corner, distancing themselves from the others. Then everyone laughed dryly as they looked at the branch card in their hands. Although they didn't know what the identity had to do with the masquerade ball, since the branch card reminded them to keep it a secret, it definitely wasn't suitable for others to see. Most of the students were sent back to their dorms and then began to act according to the instructions of the branch card. These unpredictable variables greatly increased people's interest. Dake also returned to his dorm. After he closed the door, the little devil eagerly said, "Quick, quick, quick, what are the questions?" "Don't worry." Dake smiled and sat down in front of the desk. Then he took out the branch card again and placed it on the table. The little fiendish magical beast immediately went over, only to see the first question on the branch card. https://m. Vipkanchu. VIP, question 1. Between ketchup and salad dressing, which one do you like? A. Ketchup. B. Salad dressing. C. Both. D. Neither. Looking at the first question, Dake couldn't help but ponder, so it's this type of question? Answer the question, get an identity. Maybe it's to investigate the students' hobbies through this type of question and then match them with an identity? The little devil blinked and curiously asked, "Then if I choose ketchup, what identity can I get? Vampires? Vampire?" Dark's heart skipped a beat as he suddenly raised his head to look at the little fiend. The little devil couldn't help but tilt its head and asked, "What's wrong?" The corner of Dake's mouth suddenly opened and revealed the vampire fangs in his mouth. Then he turned the school card slightly so that it was facing the little fiend. Then he said, "Little devil, you do it." The little devil, "Huh?" Facing the little devil's confusion, Dake smiled and explained, "The branch card only has a hint of confidentiality and doesn't require you to answer the question honestly. Although answering honestly is the basic knowledge under normal circumstances, this is a masquerade ball and we have to have the self-cultivation of an actor. By choosing the answer to the question, there is no doubt that you can get a different identity. Then as long as you deliberately control the answer, you can get the identity you want. Of course, the premise is that the so-called identity is the same as what I think." After the little devil monster heard this, it immediately figured it out. "So if I answer the question, I can definitely obtain the identity of a vampire?" Dake smiled. "The probability is very high." The little devil was worried. "What if it fails?" Dark smiled and said, "If I fail, then so be it. This is just a Halloween event." Although I did think about getting the golden orange star, it's not a big deal even if I don't succeed. The professors may want to tell us that the most important thing is to enjoy the holidays. What's the saying? Trick or treat. The little devil, Dake, Dake, Dake. Dark nodded and said, "Then I'll let you answer the first question." The little devil immediately said, "A." "I think so too." Dake inserted magic into his fingertips and chose A. After that, a 5-second countdown appeared on the surface of the branch card. When the countdown ended, the second question appeared. Question 2. Do you like to eat steak? If you like, how do you prefer your steak to be well done? Please answer. A. Don't like to eat steak. B. Like to eat raw steak. C. Like to eat medium rare steak. D. Like to eat medium rare steak. E. Like to eat medium rare steak. F. Like to eat medium rare steak. G. Like to eat medium rare steak. Dake raised his head. The little devil beast, however, fell into a state of distress. Of course it liked to eat steak, and it liked it a lot. But at first, it liked to eat raw steak, but then it gradually got used to cooked steak. Now it liked to eat medium rare steak. But if it chose according to its current taste, would it not choose vampire? Dake saw its confusion and said, "It's okay, just choose according to your current taste." The little devil heard it and said decisively, "Then medium rare." Dake nodded and said, "Okay, I'll choose F." After the 5-minute countdown, the third question appeared on the branch card.
Dake looked at this scene and suddenly thought, has the function of the branch card been expanded? There shouldn't be such a convenient program last year. Then, he remembered the conversation he had with Professor Cazell, and he gladly accepted this change. Question 3. If a good friend who had cheated you suddenly told you that he was dying and needed 100,000 holy coins to save him, and you have 200,000 holy coins in your hands, will you save him? A. Yes. B. No. After reading this question, Dake couldn't help but ask, who came up with this question? 200,000 holy coins and 100,000 holy coins. Did they deliberately set up such a small gap? But in the face of this question that would cause many people to have difficulty making a choice, the little devil beast decisively said, how is that possible? A betrayer should have the awareness of a betrayer. Choose B. Should I say that it was indeed the little devil? Dake chose B. The following questions were even more difficult to choose. This was the case in all aspects. But fortunately, Dake chose to let the little devil do it from the beginning, so he wasn't disgusted by these questions at all. Just like this, he answered a total of 19 questions and finally reached the 20th question. But this 20th question was different from all the previous questions. It was a math question. When the branch card showed this math question, Dake couldn't help but laugh. Which professor is it? The question itself was a more complicated type and belonged to the mathematical Olympiad category, so it required some skills to solve. This question wasn't difficult for Dake. Even if there was a countdown of 3 minutes after the question was refreshed, he could quickly answer it within the time limit. But for other students who didn't have much experience with mathematical Olympiad questions, it wasn't so easy. Of course, it was the same for the little devil. Little devil, you answer it. Although the little devil shook its head violently, Dake still said so. 3 minutes later, Dake wrote down the answer that the little devil desperately solved, guessing. After that, the 20 questions were completely finished. A new line of words appeared on the branch card. Frowny face, please wait patiently until 9 o'clock sharp. During this time, you can go to the common room. The halfling chefs have prepared a delicious breakfast for you. Can I finally eat? Dake patted the little devil's head and saw it put on his shoulder before returning to the common room. When he walked down the stairs, he happened to see a halfling chef pushing the door open, and then one after another, food carts were pushed in by the chefs. The students who came to the common room earlier had already started to receive their meals. He paused for a moment, then walked over. It can't be that there's some kind of trick in the breakfast, right? Dake, who chose ketchup, steak, and other things for breakfast, carried the tray to his usual place, put the tray on the table, and began to enjoy the delicious breakfast with the little devil. Not long after, he was surrounded by taurens and pigmen. Hey, Dake, aren't you going to take off your fangs? Doran took off the tauren's headgear with difficulty and complained. Dake showed his fangs at him and whispered, I'll tell you a secret. I'm actually a real vampire. Haha. Doran laughed. Who are you trying to scare? Dake blinked and temporarily put away the vampire ritual. Doran was surprised. Is this the effect of the outfit card? Dake nodded and said, yes. On the other side, after Pittman took off the pigman's headgear, he stared at Dake's tray and asked curiously, did you choose ketchup and medium rare steak? Dake said with a normal expression, that's a secret. Pittman touched his nose and said, that's true. Then, the three of them ate in silence. The atmosphere in the common room was obviously not as lively as before. Anyone with a brain could guess that in the masquerade ball later, everyone's position would be determined based on their identity. Regardless of the specific rules, it was a very dangerous thing to have one's identity read out at this time. Of course, there were always exceptions. There were always people who couldn't control their mouths. After breakfast, some people returned to their dorms to prevent their information from being leaked. Some people wanted to stay in the common room and watch. They had confidence in themselves and didn't care about their information being leaked. Doran wanted to stay, but Pittman pulled him away. And Luo C., who knew that Anna couldn't control herself, also pulled her back to her dorm. The common room gradually became less crowded. Dake sat where he was and played with the little demon from time to time, waiting for the time to come. At the same time, in the office of Vice Principal Sarah Shi Erfu, the mathematics professors of the 6th grade were all in the office. In front of them was a magic array. The answers that the students filled in formed a scroll and appeared on the magic array. These scrolls didn't actually need to be marked. The circuit that was set up in advance had already calculated the results. The only reason they were sitting here was to see how their respective students would answer the questions. The questions that each student received were actually different. Even the last math question was randomly selected from a 1,000-question library. But from these questions, one could still see some biases. And according to these biases, they would give the students their identities. "Hey!" Professor Li, who was sitting in the middle, suddenly exclaimed. The old professor beside her couldn't help but ask, "What's wrong?" Li looked at the scroll in front of her and suddenly showed a frightened expression. "What's going on? How could Dake answer it wrong?" "Oh. The professors instantly surrounded her. But after a while, Professor Lars Murnau, a first-year professor, said, "This wasn't written by Dake Dimming." After being reminded, Li quickly flipped through the scroll. After a while, she sighed in relief. Li was scared to death. Professor Ricky Eric, a third-year professor, curiously asked, "Is it that scary? Even if it was written by Dake Dimming, there shouldn't be a problem, right? Who doesn't make mistakes?" Li puffed up her cheeks and shook her head vigorously. Professor Eric laughed out loud. The office was filled with a cheerful atmosphere. By the way, the person in charge of this year's masquerade party was Professor Li Laplace. Time quickly passed while the professors were laughing and joking. Almost as soon as the clock turned to 9 o'clock, all the students' branch cards vibrated and made a beep 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 sound. The students quickly injected magic and activated their branch cards. Dake looked around, opened the branch card, and then opened the letter. On the card, a line of words appeared clearly. "Congratulations on obtaining a new identity, vampire." The moment Dake saw the word vampire, a smile suddenly appeared on his face. Since he chose to dress up as a vampire, of course, the identity of a vampire was the most suitable. The little monster also couldn't help but laugh. After confirming his identity, Dake immediately raised his head and looked around. The people who stayed in the common room were from 1st year to 6th year. There were quite a few familiar faces. Of course, there were also some people who were wearing leather and couldn't help it. He observed the subtle expressions of those people and tried to remember them. This year's Halloween event's new identity segment already made him subconsciously take it seriously. He had a faint premonition that the competition with the seniors would start before the Golden Cup. Beep! The branch card sounded again, making the students who were observing the others suddenly come back to their senses. Then they immediately discovered that the long-awaited event rules were finally announced. The professors chose to announce the rules after the identity distribution, which set off the atmosphere incisively and vividly. Doc took note of the rule manual that had been sent to the branch card, and began to carefully examine it. The little monster lowered its head from his shoulder and looked closely. "I see." After a few minutes, Dake finally understood the rules of this year's masquerade party. In general, this was a set of rules that combined directional cross-country and werewolf hunting. This year's masquerade party was no longer aimless. When the masquerade party officially started, which was still at 6 o'clock in the evening, every student would receive a map. There would be 100 resource points recorded on the map. The monsters in these resource points would be relatively powerful and could be called elites. After killing them, naturally, they would receive more credits and better resource rewards. But in order to find them and summon them, they had to complete the puzzle. This was exactly the same as the simulated adventure test held by Professor Pawa Cheong-si in the dual class. If they could select 20 resource points from the 100 resource points before the end of the masquerade party and successfully solve the puzzle, they would receive a very considerable amount of extra credits as a reward. This meant that if they wanted to get first place in this year's masquerade party, competing for resource points would become the most important thing. In addition to this part of the rules, The school also assigned an identity to each student. According to the identity, the students would receive different abilities. First of all, there were 10 types of identity, which were vampires, werewolf, ghost, fairy, zombie, witch, undead, bird, jacko, lantern, bichimos, titan among them. The ability of vampire was blood-sucking. Blood-sucking. After revealing your identity to people other than vampires and werewolves, you can get the opportunity to duel with them. If you win the duel, you can take 10% of the other party's credits, only available in the event. If you lose the duel, you will have to pay 10% of the credits, only available in the event. The ability of werewolf was plunder. Plunder. After revealing your identity to people other than vampires and werewolves, you can get the opportunity to duel with them. If you win the duel, you can take 20% of the other party's credits, only available in the event. If you lose the duel, you will have to pay 40% of the credits, only available in the event. The ability of ghost was steal. Steal. After designating a target other than the ghost, follow the target within 10 meters for 3 minutes without being discovered. You can steal 5% of the target's credits, only available in the event. The ability of fairy was mischief. Mischief. When you discover that someone other than the fairy is solving the puzzle of the resource point, if you can solve it first after revealing your identity, you can obtain the ownership of the resource point. The ability of zombie was infection. Infection. It can only be used on people other than zombies. It can turn their identity into a zombie within 3 minutes. Within these 3 minutes, both parties can share 10% of the credits obtained from killing ghosts and monsters and bear the same fate. The ability of witch was divination. Divination. After revealing your identity to someone other than the witch, you will get a chance to guess the other party's identity. If the guess is correct, you will get 5% of the other party's credits, only available in the event. If the guess is wrong, you will have to pay 10% of the credits, only available in the event. The ability of Phoenix was Nirvana. Nirvana. You will get a chance to choose a new identity. Before you undergo Nirvana, you will be immune to all abilities. The ability of Jack-o'-lantern was light. Light. After lighting the lantern, the ghosts killed and the resource points conquered will get an additional 5% of the credits, only available in the event. The ability of Bichimos was monster. Monster. After killing a leader-level ghost, you will get 10 times the credits reward. However, a mark will light up above its head, and everyone can duel it. The victor of the duel can take away the credits obtained after killing a leader-level ghost, and exchange identities with it. The loser of the duel will have to pay 5% of their credits. The ability of Titan was lightning punishment. Lightning punishment. Show your identity to anyone other than Titan. If the other party has obtained credits from a student of a relatively lower grade within the first 3 minutes, they will be punished with a lightning punishment and 5% of their credits will be confiscated, limited to those obtained in the event. If the judgment is wrong, you will have to pay 5% of your credits, only available in the event. Finally, all the above abilities could only be used once on the same person. Apart from steal, the other abilities could only be used within a range of 5 meters. Every time an ability was used, it would enter a cooldown period of 3 minutes. 10 identities, 10 abilities. After Dake finished reading, he couldn't help but take a deep breath. The author who could come up with this set of rules in such a short period of time was truly a genius. If these identities and abilities could be used flexibly, it would definitely increase the interest of this Halloween event to an unprecedented degree. He even felt that it was a pity to only use this set of rules once. It could be used in all kinds of competitions, and it could be used in next year's Halloween event as well. However, how interesting would the masquerade ball become under this set of rules? He would have to experience it in detail before he could truly know. Dake's eyes sparkled. He couldn't wait any longer. It's a pity that the masquerade ball officially starts after 6 o'clock in the evening. During this time, I can only stay in the dormitory. No, Perhaps I can start searching for the target now? Dake's gaze shifted. He discovered that the students in the common lounge were all restless. Among these 10 identities, only werewolf and vampire could be said to be on the same side. They couldn't attack each other, and there was no distinction of benefits. This meant that if werewolf and vampire could confirm each other's identities, they could cooperate and share information with each other. Zombies and jack-o'-lanterns were harmless. If zombies could find enough jack-o'-lanterns, they could use their abilities to efficiently harvest credits. As for witches, it would be beneficial for them to find out more people's identities as soon as possible. I see. Those who don't want to expose their identities and don't want to have their identities investigated can return to the dormitory now. Those who have other intentions can also do whatever they want before 6 o'clock. Dake smiled. After teasing the little devil for a while, he left the common lounge. He was a vampire. If he didn't want to cooperate, staying in the common lounge would only increase the risk of being exposed. After that, he only needed to recharge his energy in the dormitory and prepare for the opening of the ball at 6 o'clock in the evening. Then, he would play the role of a vampire. Letting the little demon beast answer the question is really the right strategy. If it were me, I might get the identity of a jack-o'-lantern. That would be too boring. In terms of excitement, a vampire is only a little less exciting than a werewolf. And after becoming a vampire, I don't have to worry about being caught by senior students for a duel. Although that's the case, it's too shameful to hunt junior students. I'm afraid most students won't do that, and the probability of winning a duel with senior students will be relatively low. Therefore, vampires and werewolves will probably still target junior students in the same grade. Although that's the case, because this is a masquerade ball, everyone is wearing makeup to hide their identity and not the school uniform that directly indicates their grade and school. Therefore, there is the possibility of finding the wrong opponent. My goal is to first hunt ghosts and monsters, search for a few resource points, accumulate some credits, and then find seniors of 3 or 4 years to hunt. After a simple plan, Dake summoned a few magic elves again, picked up the newspaper and books, and began to read. However, his plan to recharge his energy until 6 o'clock in the evening did not come true, because at 11 o'clock, the school card vibrated again. Then, after a short while, he picked up his cane, brought along the little fiend beast, and walked out of the dormitory, because it was time for lunch. Humans were iron, and rice was steel. But those who did not want to stay in the dormitory and eat stored food to fill their stomachs would choose to go to the common room to eat. And this lunchtime was the best time for those who were interested to gather information. As the main door of the tower was pushed open, the halfling chefs once again pushed the dining cart in. The lunch was still sumptuous, and the rich aroma of meat stimulated one's appetite. After Dake chose the food he liked, he carried the tray to his usual seat, the empty table next to him. There was no other way, his usual seat was taken. He pulled out a chair and sat down, put the tray on the table, and prepared to eat heartily. But at this time, Little Bear, who was holding a tray and walking unsteadily, as if he could topple the tray at any time, walked over. Then, he unceremoniously placed the tray beside him and pulled out a chair to sit down. And Dake guessed the small bear's identity in 0.0001 seconds. And the third princess, pulled a zipper from her chin, and then pulled it vertically upwards. Her whole bare face seemed to have cracked open, and it split in two from the middle. Then, Chi's delicate face and facial features were revealed. "Good afternoon, Dake." Chi winked at Dake, and her eyelashes were amazingly long. Dake could not help but say, "Although I can see that you have changed into a new set of leather, can't you be a little more creative?" "I like bears," Chi said coquettishly. Dake almost thought that the person sitting next to him was Anna. Oh, speak of the devil. Princess Spectre, who was only translucent due to the inferior invisibility potion, seemed to have smelled something and came over. Anna sat down next to Chi without hesitation, and then stared at Chi's leather case with great interest. Compared to the bare leather case from last year,
and Chi's case was obviously more convenient and breathable. To be honest, Anna was very envious, and Anna wanted it very much. If Dake had not said something wrong, the one sitting here wearing the bear leather case would be. No, it would be 2 little bears. What are you looking at? And Chi glared at her fiercely. It seemed that their common interests were not enough to build a bridge of friendship between them. Anna turned her face away. Fine, I won't look. Pfft. Miss Fairy, who followed closely behind, let out a mischievous laugh that was different from her usual self. Then, a small tiger also walked over to them in time. Good morning. Monthly votes please. That you're tuning in to the Narrate and Escape YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.